Hey there, and welcome. Get yourself comfortable. Maybe adjust your pillow, let your shoulders drop, and just settle in. Tonight, we're going on a fascinating journey through your body, exploring one of humanity's oldest companions, alcohol. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a lecture. Think of this more like a bedtime story, except instead of dragons and castles, we're exploring the incredible landscape inside you. You know, it's kind of amazing when you think about it. Humans have been drinking fermented beverages for at least 10,000 years. Our ancestors stumbled upon this peculiar liquid that made them feel different, made gatherings more lively, made conversations flow easier. They didn't understand what was happening inside their bodies, of course. They just knew that something changed when they drank it. But you and I, we get to peek behind that curtain tonight. We get to understand exactly what's happening at every level, from the moment that liquid touches your lips to the complex dance of molecules that follows. And I promise you, the real story is far more interesting than any mythology our ancestors could have created. So take a deep breath in, hold it for a moment, and let it out slowly. Throughout human history, alcohol has been there. The ancient Sumerians wrote poems about beer. The Egyptians paid workers building the pyramids with beer rations. Medieval Europeans drank ale with breakfast because it was safer than water. Wine has been part of religious ceremonies across countless cultures. Alcohol has been medicine, social lubricant, currency, and symbol all at once. But what is this substance really? At its most basic, alcohol, or more specifically, ethanol, is just a simple molecule. 2 carbons, 6 hydrogens, and 1 oxygen arranged in a particular way. That's it. Nothing magical, nothing mystical. Just C2H5OH, as chemists would write it. And yet, this tiny molecular arrangement can ripple through your entire body, touching nearly every system, changing how billions of cells function. Think about that for a second. Something so small you could never see it, even with the most powerful microscope, can alter your consciousness, change your heartbeat, affect your liver, influence your brain, and so much more. The human body is this incredible orchestra of chemical reactions, and alcohol walks in like an unexpected conductor, changing the tempo, the volume, the very nature of the symphony being played. Now, I want you to understand something important before we dive deeper. This isn't about telling you what to do or not do. This is just about understanding. Knowledge for its own sake. The pure pleasure of comprehending how things work. When you understand the mechanisms, the pathways, the cause and effect that happens inside you, the world becomes a richer place. You're not just living in your body anymore. You understand it. You're not just experiencing sensations. You know their origins. And here's the beautiful thing about learning while you're relaxing, while you're ready for sleep. Your mind is in this perfect state, alert enough to absorb information, but calm enough that you're not stressed about it. The information just flows in, finds its place, settles into your memory without force or effort. It's actually one of the best ways to learn. So let's start at the very beginning. Imagine you've just taken a sip of an alcoholic drink. Could be wine, beer, whiskey, sake, whatever you prefer. That liquid is now in your mouth. Even here, before you've swallowed, things are already beginning to happen. Your mouth is lined with mucous membranes, and these membranes are surprisingly absorbent. A tiny amount of alcohol, we're talking maybe 2 or 3% of what you just sipped, actually absorbs right here, directly through the tissues of your mouth, entering the bloodstream underneath. This is why some people feel effects very quickly, why a strong spirit can give you that immediate warming sensation. But this is just the preview, the opening notes. The real concert begins when you swallow, when that liquid travels down your esophagus and into your stomach. Your stomach is this muscular bag, about the size of your fist when empty, but capable of expanding significantly. It's constantly churning, mixing whatever you've eaten or drunk with gastric juices, acids and enzymes designed to break down food. When alcohol enters this environment, something interesting happens. Some of it gets absorbed right through the stomach walls, but most of it continues its journey to the small intestine, and that's where the real absorption happens. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's slow down. Take another deep breath. We have all night to explore this. There's no rush. Just let your body sink a little deeper into whatever surface you're resting on, and let's continue this journey together. So that sip of alcohol has made it to your stomach now. Let's spend some time here because this organ doesn't get enough credit for what it does. Your stomach is essentially a sophisticated chemical processing plant wrapped in muscle that can adjust its operations based on what you send down to it. When alcohol arrives, your stomach essentially has to make some decisions. You see, unlike proteins or fats or carbohydrates, alcohol doesn't need to be digested. It's already in a form that can pass through cell membranes. But your stomach has this enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, ADH for short, and it starts working on that alcohol immediately, breaking down a small portion of it before it even gets absorbed into your bloodstream. Here's something fascinating that most people don't know. Men typically have more of this stomach enzyme than women. This is one reason why, on average, women feel the effects of alcohol more quickly and intensely than men, even when they're the same size and drink the same amount. It's not about tolerance or experience or body size alone, though those factors matter too. It's about the fact that men's stomachs break down more alcohol before it enters circulation, so less actually makes it to the rest of the body. But let's say you're drinking on an empty stomach. Maybe you skipped dinner, or you're having a morning drink for some reason. When your stomach is empty, it doesn't have much else to do. There's no food to break down, no complex meal to process. So alcohol passes through relatively quickly, maybe in just 15 to 30 minutes. It absorbs through the stomach walls into the bloodstream at a fairly rapid pace. Now imagine a different scenario. You've just had a big meal. Your stomach is full of pasta, or a burger, or a hearty soup, whatever you ate. Now when alcohol arrives, it has to wait its turn. Your stomach is busy working on all that food. The alcohol gets diluted by all the other contents. The food physically slows down how fast the stomach empties into the small intestine. And here's the interesting part. Fats especially slow everything down. If you've eaten something fatty, it triggers a response that actually delays stomach emptying even more. This is why you feel alcohol's effects so much faster on an empty stomach. It's not psychological, it's pure biology. The alcohol reaches your bloodstream much quicker when there's nothing else in the queue. And this is also why eating before or while drinking genuinely does moderate alcohol's effects. You're not just being responsible, you're actually changing the pharmacokinetics, the literal movement of alcohol through your system. Your stomach lining is remarkable when you think about it. It has to be tough enough to handle hydrochloric acid, yes, actual acid strong enough to dissolve metal, while also being delicate enough to absorb nutrients and, in this case, alcohol. The cells of your stomach lining are constantly being renewed, completely replacing themselves every few days, because the environment they live in is so harsh. When alcohol is in your stomach, especially in high concentrations, it can irritate this lining. Alcohol is a solvent, which means it can break down fats and proteins. At lower concentrations, your stomach handles it fine. But if you drink a lot, or drink something with a very high alcohol content, it can start to damage that protective mucus layer that keeps your stomach from digesting itself. This is part of why excessive drinking can lead to gastritis, inflammation of the stomach lining. Your stomach is literally getting irritated by what you're putting in it. But for now, in our calm exploration, let's just observe what's happening with a normal amount of alcohol. Maybe that one glass of wine or bottle of beer. The alcohol is sitting in your stomach, some of it getting broken down by that ADH enzyme, some of it being absorbed through the stomach walls, and most of it waiting to move forward into the small intestine. The rate at which your stomach empties is controlled by a valve at the bottom called the pyloric sphincter. This muscular ring acts like a gatekeeper, opening and closing to let small amounts of stomach contents through into the small intestine. When you've been drinking, this valve controls the flow of alcohol into the next stage of digestion. It's working constantly, pulsing open and closed, and with each opening, a little more of that alcohol-containing liquid passes through. And once it passes through that valve, once it enters the small intestine, that's when things really start to accelerate. Because the small intestine is where the majority of alcohol absorption happens. But let's not rush there yet. Take a moment, breathe. Notice how relaxed you're feeling. We'll continue this journey in just a moment, but for now, just rest with this image of your stomach, doing its careful work, processing and passing along what you've consumed. Now, we arrive at perhaps the most important part of alcohol's journey through your digestive system, the small intestine. And I want you to really picture this for a moment. If you could somehow stretch out your small intestine and lay it flat, it would cover a surface area roughly the size of a tennis court. All of that, packed and folded into your abdomen. It's genuinely one of the most remarkable organs you have. The small intestine is where your body does most of its nutrient absorption, and it's incredibly efficient at its job. The walls of the small intestine aren't smooth. They're covered with millions of tiny, finger-like projections called villi, and those villi are covered with even tinier projections called microvilli. This creates an enormous surface area for absorption. When alcohol enters this environment, it encounters this vast absorptive surface, and things happen quickly. Within minutes of alcohol entering your small intestine, it's being absorbed into your bloodstream. This happens through a process called passive diffusion. Unlike nutrients that need special transport proteins to get across cell membranes, alcohol just slides right through. It's a small molecule, and it dissolves easily in both water and fat, which means it can pass through cell membranes almost effortlessly. This is actually what makes alcohol unique among the things we consume. Think about sugar for a moment. Your body has specific transporters in the intestinal cells designed to grab sugar molecules and pull them through. Proteins get broken down into amino acids, and those amino acids have their own transport systems. But alcohol, it just diffuses across. No special equipment needed. This is part of why alcohol acts so fast compared to food. Food has to be broken down, processed, actively transported. Alcohol just flows through. The blood vessels in your small intestine are connected to something called the hepatic portal system. This is basically a network of veins that collects blood from your entire digestive tract and carries it directly to your liver before it goes anywhere else in your body. Your body is clever this way. It knows that whatever comes from your gut should probably be screened by the liver first, just in case it's something harmful. So as alcohol absorbs through your small intestine, it enters these blood vessels, and all that blood gets channeled into the hepatic portal vein, which carries it straight to your liver. We'll spend a lot of time talking about your liver later, because it's the real star of alcohol metabolism. But for now, just understand that your body's design means the liver gets first crack at anything you've consumed. The speed of absorption in the small intestine depends on several factors. We already talked about food, how eating slows everything down. But the type of alcohol matters too. Carbonated alcoholic drinks, like champagne or beer, actually get absorbed slightly faster because the carbonation can speed up stomach emptying. The bubbles create a kind of pressure that helps push contents into the small intestine more quickly. Concentration matters as well, but not always in the way you might think. Very dilute alcohol, like a light beer, gets absorbed steadily, but not especially fast. Moderate concentrations, like wine or regular strength spirits mixed into drinks, get absorbed the fastest. But very high concentrations, like straight shots of high-proof liquor, can actually slow absorption because they irritate the stomach lining and delay stomach emptying. Your stomach essentially hesitates when faced with such a harsh substance. The entire absorption process, from that first sip to peak blood alcohol concentration, usually takes somewhere between 30 minutes to 2 hours. This window depends on all those factors we've discussed. What you've eaten, how fast you're drinking, what type of alcohol it is, your individual physiology. But on average, you reach your peak blood alcohol level about 30 to 45 minutes after finishing a drink on an empty stomach. Here's something worth understanding. Once alcohol is in your bloodstream, it's distributed throughout your body water. Your blood doesn't just stay in your blood vessels. It circulates, and the alcohol in it diffuses into all the water-containing tissues of your body. Your muscles, organs, brain. Everywhere blood goes, alcohol follows. This is why blood alcohol concentration is such a useful measure. It tells you how much alcohol is dissolved in the water content of your body overall. And this is where individual differences really start to matter. Someone with more body water will dilute the same amount of alcohol more than someone with less body water. Since muscle tissue contains more water than fat tissue, and since men typically have a higher percentage of muscle mass than women, This is another reason why women typically experience higher blood alcohol levels from the same amount of alcohol. It's not about weakness or strength. It's about water distribution and volume. Your small intestine doesn't care about any of this, of course. It's just doing its job, absorbing whatever passes through. But the efficiency of this organ means that once you've swallowed alcohol, the process is largely inevitable. It will be absorbed. It will enter your bloodstream. And from there, it will travel throughout your entire body. Let's talk about your liver. If your body were a city, your liver would be the water treatment plant, the recycling center, the chemical factory, and the power station all combined into one. It's the largest internal organ you have, weighing about 3 pounds in most adults, and it performs over 500 different functions. 500. Think about that for a moment. Your liver sits in the upper right part of your abdomen, tucked mostly behind your rib cage. It's a deep reddish-brown color because it's so full of blood. At any given moment, your liver holds about 13% of your body's total blood supply. And remember, every drop of blood coming from your digestive system passes through your liver first. So, here comes the alcohol, carried in blood from your small intestine through the hepatic portal vein. Your liver cells, called hepatocytes, are ready. These cells are remarkable little factories, equipped with enzymes specifically designed to break down and neutralize potentially harmful substances. And make no mistake, your body treats alcohol as a poison. Not in a judgmental way, just as a chemical fact. Alcohol is a toxin, and your liver's job is to detoxify it. The primary enzyme involved in breaking down alcohol is that same one we mentioned before, alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH. But while your stomach has some of this enzyme, your liver is where the real work happens. Liver cells are packed with ADH, and they start converting alcohol into something called acetaldehyde. Now here's where things get interesting from a chemistry perspective. Acetaldehyde is actually more toxic than alcohol itself. It's the same stuff that's in cigarette smoke, and it's a known carcinogen. Your body definitely doesn't want it hanging around. But your liver is prepared for this. It has another enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase, or ALDH, which very quickly converts that acetaldehyde into acetate. Acetate is basically vinegar, the same thing that gives vinegar its distinctive smell. And acetate is pretty harmless. Your body can easily break it down further into water and carbon dioxide, which you eventually breathe out and urinate away. This two-step process, alcohol to acetaldehyde to acetate, is happening in your liver cells constantly, as long as there's alcohol in your system. And here's the thing about this process. It happens at a fairly fixed rate. Your liver can process roughly 1 standard drink per hour. This is where that rule of thumb comes from. 1 beer, 1 glass of wine, 1 shot of spirits. Each contains about 14 grams of pure alcohol, and your liver needs about an hour to break that down. You can't speed this process up. No amount of coffee, cold showers, or walking around will make your liver work faster. The enzymes work at the speed they work. It's like an assembly line running at a set pace. If you drink faster than your liver can process, the alcohol accumulates in your bloodstream. Simple as that. Now, some people have genetic variations that affect these enzymes. Some people of East Asian descent, for example, have a version of ALDH that doesn't work as efficiently. When they drink, acetaldehyde builds up more than it does in other people. This causes something called the alcohol flush reaction. Their face and neck turn red, they feel warm, their heart rate increases, and they might feel nauseous. This isn't an allergy exactly. It's a genetic difference in how efficiently they can clear that toxic intermediate compound. Your liver is tough, but it's not indestructible. When it's constantly processing alcohol, several things start to happen. First, the metabolism of alcohol uses up something called NAD+, which is a molecule your liver needs for lots of other metabolic processes. When NAD+ gets depleted, because it's all being used for alcohol metabolism, other functions suffer. This is part of why heavy drinking affects fat metabolism. Your liver starts accumulating fat because it's so focused on dealing with alcohol that it can't process fats normally. Over time, if drinking is frequent and heavy, liver cells start to get damaged. Some die and scar tissue forms. This is called fibrosis, and if it continues, it becomes cirrhosis, extensive scarring that permanently damages the liver structure and function. But we're not here to scare you. We're just understanding the mechanisms, the reality of what happens at the cellular level. Your liver has an amazing capacity to regenerate, though. If you could remove half of someone's liver, it would grow back to nearly its full size within months. The cells divide and replicate, rebuilding what was lost. This regenerative capacity is remarkable, and it means that even if some damage has occurred, stopping or reducing drinking allows the liver to heal, at least to some extent, depending on how far things have gone. For now, just picture your liver, working steadily, methodically breaking down alcohol molecule by molecule. It never complains, never protests. It just does its job, hour after hour, protecting the rest of your body from this chemical you've introduced. While your liver is working on processing alcohol, that alcohol is also circulating throughout your entire body with every heartbeat. Let's follow that journey now. Your heart pumps about 5 liters of blood every single minute when you're at rest. That means all the blood in your body makes a complete circuit roughly once per minute. It's an endless loop, carrying oxygen, nutrients, waste products, hormones, immune cells, and yes, alcohol. When alcohol leaves your liver, or rather, when the blood containing alcohol leaves your liver, it flows into the inferior vena cava, one of the large veins that returns blood to your heart. From there, it enters the right side of your heart, gets pumped to your lungs, where it picks up fresh oxygen, returns to the left side of your heart, and then gets pumped out through your aorta to your entire body. This whole circuit takes less than a minute. As this alcohol-containing blood flows through your arteries, then into smaller arterioles, then into tiny capillaries, the alcohol diffuses out into the surrounding tissues. Remember, alcohol is really good at crossing membranes. It doesn't stay contained in blood vessels. It spreads into the fluid between cells, into the cells themselves. Anywhere blood goes, alcohol follows close behind. Different organs receive different amounts of blood flow, which means they're exposed to alcohol at different rates and concentrations. Your brain, despite being only about 2% of your body weight, receives about 15% of your cardiac output, the blood your heart pumps. This is because brain tissue is incredibly metabolically active. It needs constant supplies of oxygen and glucose. But this also means your brain gets exposed to alcohol very quickly and at relatively high concentrations. Your kidneys also receive a huge portion of blood flow, about 20% of cardiac output. They're constantly filtering your blood, removing waste products and excess substances, regulating fluid balance and blood pressure. When alcohol arrives at your kidneys, it affects how they function in some interesting ways, which we'll explore more later. But for now, just understand that your kidneys are seeing a lot of alcohol pass through them. Your muscles receive blood flow based on what they're doing. At rest, muscles get a moderate blood supply. But when you exercise, blood vessels in your muscles dilate, and they can receive up to 80% of your cardiac output. This is part of why exercise and alcohol don't mix well. Both are competing for blood flow, and alcohol impairs your muscles' ability to function efficiently. Even your skin receives blood flow, and this is why you might look flushed when drinking. Alcohol causes blood vessels near your skin's surface to dilate, bringing more warm blood close to the surface. This creates that sensation of warmth, though ironically, you're actually losing heat to the environment. This is why drinking in cold weather can be dangerous. You feel warm while your core body temperature is actually dropping. As blood circulates, your liver keeps steadily removing alcohol from it, but new alcohol keeps being absorbed from your digestive system if you're still drinking or if you recently finished a drink. Your blood alcohol concentration rises to a peak and then gradually falls as your liver works through the backlog. This is that classic curve you might have seen in health classes. Blood alcohol rises, peaks, then descends over several hours. The legal limit for driving in most places is a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08%. That seems like a tiny number, right? 0.08. But think about what that actually means. It means that in every 100 milliliters of your blood, there's 80 milligrams of pure alcohol. Since you have about 5 liters of blood total at 0.08% BAC, There's roughly 4 grams of alcohol circulating in your bloodstream at that moment. That's enough to affect brain function, reaction time, judgment, and coordination. Such a small amount, such significant effects. Blood alcohol concentration is a snapshot, though. It tells you what's in your blood right now, at this moment. But alcohol is also in your tissues, in the fluid around your cells, even dissolved in your breath, which is why breathalyzers work. The alcohol in your blood is in equilibrium with alcohol in your lungs' air sacs, so the amount in your breath reflects the amount in your blood. Pretty clever when you think about it. Some tissues hold on to alcohol longer than others. Fatty tissues, for instance, absorb alcohol but release it more slowly. This creates a kind of reservoir effect. Even after alcohol has been cleared from your blood, small amounts are still diffusing back out of fatty tissues. This is usually such a small amount that it doesn't matter much, but it's part of why the complete elimination of alcohol takes longer than just the time for blood alcohol to reach zero. Your blood is this incredible transport system, this river flowing through you, touching every part of your body. And when alcohol is in that river, it reaches everywhere, affecting systems you might not even think about. Now we reach perhaps the most fascinating part of this journey. What happens in your brain? Your brain is the most complex structure we know of in the universe. About 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, creating trillions of connections. Every thought, sensation, memory, emotion, and movement comes from the electrical and chemical signaling between these cells. And alcohol changes how this signaling works. When alcohol-containing blood reaches your brain, alcohol crosses the blood-brain barrier almost instantly. This barrier is usually pretty selective, protecting your brain from harmful substances, but alcohol is so small and dissolves so easily in fats that it passes right through. Within minutes of drinking, alcohol molecules are inside your brain tissue, interacting with neurons. Your neurons communicate using chemicals called neurotransmitters. When an electrical signal reaches the end of one neuron, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters into the tiny gap between neurons, the synapse. These chemical messengers float across that gap and bind to receptors on the next neuron, passing the signal along. This happens billions of times per second in your brain, creating the symphony of activity that is your consciousness. Alcohol affects multiple neurotransmitter systems, but 2 are especially important. First, there's GABA, which stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid. GABA is your brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. When GABA binds to receptors, it makes neurons less likely to fire. It's like turning down the volume. GABA is essential for preventing your brain from getting too excited, too active. It's part of what helps you relax, fall asleep, and stay calm. Alcohol enhances GABA's effects. When alcohol molecules are present, they make GABA receptors more sensitive. They essentially amplify GABA's inhibitory signal. This is a big part of why alcohol makes you feel relaxed, less anxious, and eventually sleepy. Your brain's activity is being dampened, turned down. This feels pleasant at first. The relief of tension, the easing of social anxiety, that comfortable feeling of relaxation. But there's another neurotransmitter system involved. Glutamate. Glutamate is the opposite of GABA. It's your brain's main excitatory neurotransmitter. When glutamate binds to its receptors, it makes neurons more likely to fire. It's like turning up the volume. Glutamate is essential for learning, memory, and keeping your brain alert and active. Alcohol suppresses glutamate activity. It interferes with certain glutamate receptors, particularly ones called NMDA receptors. With less glutamate signaling happening, your brain becomes less excitable, less active. Combined with the enhanced GABA effects, you can see why alcohol is classified as a depressant, not in the emotional sense, but in the sense that it depresses or slows down brain activity. This shift in the balance between excitation and inhibition creates the characteristic effects we associate with drinking. At low doses, you feel relaxed, maybe a bit more social. The parts of your brain involved in anxiety and inhibition are being suppressed. You might feel more talkative, more outgoing. You're not actually more interesting or funnier. Your brain just cares less about self-monitoring and worry. As blood alcohol rises, more effects appear. Your cerebellum, which coordinates movement and balance, becomes affected. Alcohol interferes with the precise signaling needed for smooth, coordinated motion. This is why people develop clumsy movements, unsteady gait, and difficulty with fine motor tasks when intoxicated. The cerebellum is trying to coordinate movement, but the signals are muddy, imprecise. Your hippocampus, crucial for forming new memories, is particularly sensitive to alcohol. This is why people can experience blackouts, gaps in memory from periods when they were drinking. During a blackout, the person is conscious and functioning, but their brain isn't successfully transferring experiences into long-term memory. The hippocampus, with its memory-forming processes disrupted by alcohol, simply doesn't encode what's happening. Later, there's nothing to remember, because the memory was never formed in the first place. Your prefrontal cortex, involved in judgment, planning, and impulse control, also becomes less active under alcohol's influence. This is why people make decisions while drinking that they wouldn't make sober. It's not that they suddenly become different people. It's that the brain regions that normally provide good judgment and consideration of consequences aren't functioning at full capacity. The brake pedal becomes less responsive. The interesting thing is that these effects happen at different blood alcohol concentrations. The relaxation and lowered anxiety can happen at fairly low levels. The impairment of judgment and coordination happens at moderate levels. Memory blackouts typically require higher levels. And at very high levels, alcohol can suppress the brain regions that control breathing and heart rate, which is why acute alcohol poisoning can be fatal. The brain literally forgets to tell the body to breathe. Different people experience these effects at different levels based on tolerance, genetics, body size, and many other factors. But the mechanisms are the same for everyone. Alcohol is changing the fundamental balance of excitation and inhibition in your brain, and that change ripples through every aspect of how you think, feel, move, and perceive the world. Let's go deeper into this fascinating neurochemistry. We've talked about GABA and glutamate, but your brain uses dozens of different neurotransmitters, and alcohol touches several of them. Each neurotransmitter is like a different language your neurons use to communicate, and alcohol is affecting multiple conversations at once. There's dopamine, for instance. You've probably heard of dopamine. It's famous for being associated with pleasure and reward. When you experience something good, eating delicious food, hearing great music, achieving a goal, dopamine release is part of what makes that feel satisfying. Your brain's reward system evolved to reinforce behaviors that help survival. Food, sex, social bonding. These trigger dopamine release, creating that feeling of satisfaction that makes you want to repeat the behavior. Alcohol triggers dopamine release in an area called the nucleus accumbens, which is central to the brain's reward circuit. This is part of why drinking feels good, why it can become reinforcing. Your brain's reward system is essentially saying, "Hey, that was pleasant. Let's remember this and maybe do it again." This isn't unique to alcohol. Many enjoyable experiences involve dopamine release. But substances that directly trigger this system can be particularly reinforcing, which is part of the science behind addiction. The amount of dopamine release depends on various factors, including how much you drink, how quickly the blood alcohol rises, and your individual brain chemistry. That initial drink might cause a pleasant dopamine spike. But interestingly, as a person develops tolerance or problematic drinking patterns, the brain adapts. Dopamine release from alcohol becomes less pronounced over time, while the brain becomes more sensitive to the absence of alcohol. This is part of what creates the cycle where someone needs to drink more to get the same effect, or feels uncomfortable when not drinking. Then there's serotonin, another neurotransmitter you've probably heard about. Serotonin is involved in mood regulation, sleep, appetite, and many other functions. Alcohol affects serotonin systems in complex ways. Initially, it can increase serotonin levels, which contributes to mood changes, and that sense of well-being some people get from drinking. But chronic heavy drinking disrupts serotonin systems, which is part of why alcoholism is so strongly associated with depression. The brain's serotonin signaling becomes dysregulated. There's also a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, which is involved in arousal, alertness, and the stress response. Alcohol generally reduces norepinephrine activity, contributing to sedation and reduced anxiety. But when alcohol is removed after regular heavy use, norepinephrine systems can become overactive, which is part of why alcohol withdrawal can involve anxiety, agitation, and increased heart rate. Your brain is constantly trying to maintain balance, what scientists call homeostasis. When you introduce alcohol regularly, your brain adapts. It's trying to compensate for alcohol's depressant effects. Neurons might change the number of receptors they have. They might alter how sensitive those receptors are. They might change how much neurotransmitter they produce. All of this is your brain trying to maintain normal function despite the presence of alcohol. This adaptation is what creates tolerance. When someone first starts drinking, relatively small amounts of alcohol produce significant effects. But over time, the brain adapts to alcohol's presence, and larger amounts are needed to produce the same effects. The person isn't imagining this. Their brain has literally changed at the cellular level to compensate for alcohol. And this is also why sudden cessation after heavy regular use can be dangerous. If someone has been drinking heavily for a long time, their brain has adapted to function in the presence of alcohol. The glutamate system, which alcohol normally suppresses, has upregulated, become more active to compensate. GABA systems might have downregulated. When alcohol is suddenly removed, the brain is out of balance in the opposite direction. Too much excitation, not enough inhibition. This can lead to anxiety, tremors, sweating, rapid heart rate, and in severe cases, seizures. This is why medical supervision is often needed for alcohol withdrawal. The brain needs time to readapt to functioning without alcohol. The endogenous opioid system is also involved. Yes, your brain makes its own opioid-like chemicals, endorphins and enkephalins. These are involved in pain modulation, reward, and emotional regulation. Alcohol affects this system too, and this is part of its complex effects on mood and behavior. Some of the medications used to help people reduce drinking, like naltrexone, work by blocking opioid receptors, which reduces the rewarding effects of alcohol. Even your cannabinoid system is involved. Your brain has receptors for cannabinoids, the same receptors that respond to marijuana, because your brain produces its own cannabinoid-like chemicals called endocannabinoids. These are involved in many functions, including mood, memory, appetite, and pain sensation. Alcohol interacts with this system as well, adding another layer to its complex neurological effects. What I want you to understand is that alcohol isn't just doing one thing in your brain. It's not flipping a single switch. It's affecting multiple systems simultaneously, each with its own functions and adaptations. Your brain is this incredibly complex network, and alcohol is like a ripple that touches many parts of that network at once. The effects you feel, the relaxation, the mood change, the impairment, are the result of all these systems changing together. Let's talk about how alcohol changes the way you perceive the world around you. Your eyes are extraordinary organs. Light enters through your cornea, passes through your lens which focuses it, and hits your retina at the back of your eye. Your retina contains about 100 million photoreceptor cells that convert light into electrical signals. These signals travel through your optic nerve to your brain, where they're processed into the rich visual experience you have every moment you're awake. When alcohol enters your system, it affects vision in multiple ways. First, there's the physical mechanics of your eyes. Your eye muscles, which control how your eyes move and focus, become less coordinated under alcohol's influence. This happens through the same mechanism affecting all your muscles. Alcohol's impact on the cerebellum and motor control centers in your brain. You might notice that it's harder to focus on things when you've been drinking. Your eyes might feel tired, heavy. This is partly because the muscles controlling your lens, allowing you to focus on near and far objects, are not responding as precisely as usual. Your eyes might also not move together quite as well. Normally, your eyes work as a perfectly coordinated pair, moving in exact synchrony. But alcohol can disrupt this coordination slightly, making it harder to maintain single, clear vision. This is where double vision can come from at higher blood alcohol levels. Your eyes aren't perfectly aligned anymore, so each eye is sending a slightly different image to your brain. Normally, your brain fuses these two images effortlessly. But when the misalignment is too great, you see double. It's not that your eyes are damaged, it's that the neural control of eye muscles has been impaired. There's also the pupil response. Your pupils constantly adjust their size based on light levels and what you're focusing on. These adjustments are controlled by small muscles in your iris, and those muscles are under neural control. Alcohol can slow down these pupil responses, making them less reactive to changes in light. This might contribute to sensitivity to bright lights or difficulty seeing in darkness when drinking. But the visual effects go beyond just the mechanics of your eyes. Visual processing happens in your brain, and alcohol affects how your brain interprets what your eyes are seeing. Your visual cortex, located at the back of your brain, receives signals from your eyes and constructs your visual experience. This isn't a simple process. Your brain is actively interpreting, filling in gaps, making predictions about what it's seeing. Alcohol slows down processing speed throughout your brain, including in visual areas. This means reaction time to visual stimuli becomes slower. If you're driving, for instance, and a brake light comes on ahead of you, there's a delay between when the light hits your retina and when your brain fully processes that information and initiates a response. That delay increases with alcohol. It might only be a fraction of a second, but at highway speeds, that can mean many feet of distance before you start braking. Peripheral vision can be affected too. Normally, you're aware of movement and objects in your peripheral visual field, even when you're not looking directly at them. This peripheral awareness is important for navigation, safety, and spatial awareness. Alcohol can narrow what's called your functional field of view. You might become more focused on what's directly in front of you, less aware of things happening at the edges of your vision. This is sometimes described as tunnel vision. Color perception can change subtly as well. The cells in your retina that process color information, cone cells, are sensitive to red, green, or blue light. Your brain combines information from these cells to create your experience of color. Some research suggests that alcohol affects color discrimination, particularly in the blue-yellow spectrum. This isn't usually dramatic enough to notice in daily life, but it's measurable in careful testing. Depth perception relies on several cues. One is stereopsis, the slight difference between what each eye sees because they're positioned slightly apart. Your brain uses this difference to calculate depth. When alcohol affects eye coordination and muscle control, it can subtly impair depth perception. This is why tasks that require precise spatial judgment, like parking a car or pouring liquid into a glass, become more difficult when drinking. Visual tracking is another affected ability. If you watch a moving object, a ball flying through the air, a car passing by, your eyes smoothly follow it. This smooth pursuit eye movement requires precise coordination. Alcohol disrupts this, making eye movements more jerky, less smooth. Again, you might not notice this subjectively, but it's measurable and affects your ability to track moving objects accurately. Even your ability to recover from bright lights is affected. If you've ever walked from a dark room into bright sunlight, you know that moment of discomfort before your eyes adjust. Or going from light to dark, those moments before you can see properly. These adaptations take time normally, but alcohol slows them down further. The fascinating thing is that many of these changes happen at blood alcohol levels, where people insist they're fine to drive or perform complex tasks. The impairments are real and measurable, but your subjective experience might not fully capture them. This is part of why alcohol is so dangerous in situations requiring coordination and quick reactions. Your sense of balance is something you probably take for granted until it's disrupted. You stand, walk, run, turn your head, lean over, and somehow you maintain your orientation and don't fall over. This seems simple, but it's actually the result of incredibly complex integration of multiple sensory systems, and alcohol disrupts several of them simultaneously. First, there's your vestibular system, the balance organs in your inner ear. Inside each ear, you have 3 semicircular canals, arranged in 3 perpendicular planes. These canals are filled with fluid, and they have tiny hair cells inside them. When you move your head, the fluid in these canals moves, bending the hair cells, which sends signals to your brain about the direction and speed of head movement. You also have 2 otolith organs, the utricle and saccule, that detect gravity and linear acceleration. These contain tiny calcium carbonate crystals, called otoliths, sitting on top of hair cells. When your head tilts or accelerates, gravity and inertia cause these crystals to shift, bending the hair cells underneath. This tells your brain about your head's position relative to gravity and about linear movement. Under normal circumstances, your brain receives this constant stream of information from your vestibular system and uses it to maintain balance and coordinate eye movements. But alcohol affects the density of the fluid in your semicircular canals. Alcohol can change the specific gravity of the endolymph, the fluid in your inner ear, relative to the cupula, the structure that the hair cells are embedded in. This density mismatch causes the cupula to become buoyant and float slightly, which bends the hair cells even when you're not moving. Your vestibular system is essentially sending false signals to your brain, saying, "We're moving," when you're actually still. This creates that sensation of spinning that can happen when you're lying down after drinking. The room isn't spinning. Your inner ear is telling your brain that you're moving in ways you're not. This is also why closing your eyes can sometimes make this worse. Normally, vision is a powerful stabilizing force for balance. Your brain uses visual information to confirm or correct what your vestibular system is reporting. When you close your eyes, you remove that visual anchor, and the false signals from your altered vestibular system become more prominent. But balance isn't just about your inner ear. Your brain also uses information from proprioceptors, sensors in your muscles, tendons, and joints that tell you where your body parts are in space. Close your eyes and touch your nose. You can do this because proprioception tells you where your hand and nose are. These sensors are constantly feeding information to your brain about joint angles, muscle tension, and body position. Alcohol affects proprioception too. The processing of proprioceptive signals happens in your cerebellum and other brain regions, and we already know alcohol impairs cerebellar function. So you're getting less accurate information about where your body parts are and how they're moving. Try standing on one foot after drinking, and you'll feel how much harder it is. Your brain isn't getting clear, precise information about body position, and the muscles that make tiny adjustments to maintain balance aren't being controlled as accurately. Vision, as mentioned, also plays a major role in balance. You unconsciously use visual cues about your position relative to your surroundings to maintain stability. We already discussed how alcohol affects vision, and this compounds the balance problems. Your cerebellum is integrating all this information, vestibular, proprioceptive, visual, and using it to coordinate movement and maintain balance. The cerebellum is incredibly sensitive to alcohol. It's one of the first brain regions where you can see functional impairment. This is why sobriety tests often include balance tasks. They're testing cerebellar function. Walking in a straight line, standing on one foot, touching your nose with your finger with your eyes closed. These are all tasks that require the cerebellum to accurately integrate sensory information and coordinate motor output. When alcohol impairs the cerebellum, these tasks become difficult. The extent of impairment depends on blood alcohol concentration, but also on tolerance and individual differences. Someone who drinks regularly might be able to mask mild impairment better, not because their cerebellum is functioning normally, but because they've learned compensatory strategies. Their performance is still worse than sober, just not as obviously impaired. There's also something called state-dependent learning. If someone practices a task while intoxicated, they might actually perform it better while intoxicated than while sober, and vice versa. This is because the brain learns motor patterns in the state it's in, but this doesn't mean alcohol improves performance. It means the brain adapts to performing under impairment. The sensation of the room spinning, the difficulty walking straight, the impaired ability to catch yourself if you stumble, all of this comes from alcohol affecting multiple systems that normally work together seamlessly. Your brain is receiving conflicting or degraded information from your vestibular system, your proprioceptors, your eyes, and the control systems that use this information are themselves impaired. No wonder balance becomes so difficult. Let's move to your heart now. Your heart is a pump, pure and simple, but what an extraordinary pump it is. About the size of your closed fist, beating roughly once per second, every second, for your entire life. In an average lifetime, your heart will beat about 2.5 billion times, and it's incredibly sensitive to chemical signals, including alcohol. When alcohol enters your bloodstream and reaches your heart, several things begin to happen. First, there's the immediate effect on heart rate. At low to moderate doses, alcohol typically causes your heart rate to increase slightly. This happens partly because alcohol causes blood vessels throughout your body to dilate, to widen. When blood vessels dilate, blood pressure tends to drop slightly, and your heart compensates by beating a bit faster to maintain adequate circulation. This vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels, is why you might feel warm when drinking, why your face might flush. Blood vessels near your skin surface are opening up, allowing more warm blood to flow near the surface. This is pleasant in a warm environment, but as mentioned before, it's actually causing you to lose heat. In cold weather, this can be dangerous because you feel warm while your core temperature is actually dropping. Your heart muscle itself is also directly affected by alcohol. Cardiac muscle cells, like all cells, have membranes with various channels and pumps that control the flow of ions, electrically charged particles like sodium, potassium, and calcium. These ion flows create the electrical signals that cause your heart to contract rhythmically. Alcohol can affect these ion channels, particularly calcium channels. Calcium flow into heart muscle cells is crucial for the strength of contraction. Alcohol can interfere with this, which is why very high blood alcohol levels can reduce the heart's pumping efficiency. The heart muscle just doesn't contract as forcefully. There's also the effect on heart rhythm. Your heart's rhythm is controlled by a specialized group of cells called the sinoatrial node, your natural pacemaker. This node generates electrical impulses that spread through your heart in a coordinated wave, causing the chambers to contract in sequence. Alcohol can affect the electrical properties of heart tissue, increasing the risk of arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats. One particular arrhythmia associated with alcohol is atrial fibrillation, often called AFib. This is where the upper chambers of your heart, the atria, quiver irregularly instead of contracting normally. This can happen even in otherwise healthy people after heavy drinking. It's sometimes called holiday heart syndrome because it was noticed to occur after periods of heavy drinking during holidays. Usually, the rhythm returns to normal as alcohol is metabolized, but it's still concerning because AFib increases the risk of blood clots and stroke. Blood pressure is another consideration. Acutely, as we mentioned, alcohol can lower blood pressure slightly due to vasodilation, but chronic heavy drinking tends to increase blood pressure over time. The mechanisms are complex, involving effects on the kidneys, the nervous system, and the blood vessels themselves. High blood pressure is a risk factor for heart disease, stroke, and many other conditions. The relationship between alcohol and heart disease is complicated and has been debated extensively. Some research has suggested that light to moderate drinking might have protective effects on the heart, possibly by increasing HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, or by affecting blood clotting factors. But recent research has questioned these findings, and the current consensus is shifting toward the view that any amount of alcohol carries some risk, and the supposed benefits may have been overstated or confounded by other lifestyle factors. What's clear is that heavy drinking is definitely bad for your heart. It can lead to a condition called alcoholic cardiomyopathy, where the heart muscle becomes weakened and enlarged. The chambers stretch out, the walls thin, and the heart becomes less efficient as a pump. This can lead to heart failure, a condition where the heart can't pump enough blood to meet the body's needs. This damage occurs over years of heavy drinking. Alcohol has a direct toxic effect on heart muscle cells. It affects protein synthesis, damages mitochondria, the energy-producing structures in cells, and promotes oxidative stress and inflammation. Over time, heart muscle cells die and are replaced by scar tissue, and the heart's structure and function deteriorate. Even at lower levels of drinking, there are effects on the cardiovascular system. Alcohol affects blood clotting, the complex cascade of reactions that stops bleeding when you're injured. In moderate amounts, alcohol can make blood less likely to clot, which might be protective against certain types of clots. But it also means wounds might bleed more, and bruising can occur more easily. Your entire circulatory system is affected by alcohol, not just your heart. Blood vessels throughout your body are lined with endothelial cells that play important roles in regulating blood flow, preventing clots, and modulating inflammation. Alcohol affects endothelial function, and chronic heavy drinking can lead to endothelial dysfunction, which is an early step in the development of atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of arteries. Think about it. Your heart and blood vessels are transporting that alcohol to every corner of your body, and in the process, they're being affected by it themselves. Now, let's visit your kidneys. You have two of them, each about the size of your fist, sitting in your lower back on either side of your spine. If your liver is your body's chemical processing plant, your kidneys are the filtration and fluid management system. Every drop of blood in your body passes through your kidneys multiple times per day. They filter about 50 gallons of blood daily, removing waste products and excess substances while keeping what you need. Each kidney contains about 1 million tiny filtration units called nephrons. Each nephron has a cluster of capillaries called a glomerulus, where blood gets filtered, and a long tubule where the filtrate is processed. As fluid moves through this tubule, your body reclaims water, useful molecules, and electrolytes, while leaving waste products and excess substances to be excreted as urine. This process is incredibly sophisticated, with different parts of the nephron responsible for handling different substances and responding to different hormonal signals. Your kidneys don't just filter passively. They actively regulate your body's fluid balance, electrolyte concentrations, blood pressure, and acid-base balance. They even produce hormones, including erythropoietin, which stimulates red blood cell production, and renin, which regulates blood pressure. When alcohol enters your system, one of the most noticeable effects is increased urine production. You've probably experienced this. When drinking, you need to urinate more frequently than the volume of liquid you're consuming would normally require. This happens because alcohol inhibits the release of a hormone called vasopressin, also known as antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. Yes, confusingly, this is a different ADH from alcohol dehydrogenase. Vasopressin is produced in your hypothalamus and released by your pituitary gland. Its job is to tell your kidneys to reabsorb more water from the filtrate. When vasopressin levels are high, your kidneys make more concentrated urine and retain more water. When vasopressin levels drop, your kidneys allow more water to be excreted, producing more dilute urine. Alcohol suppresses vasopressin release. With less vasopressin present, your kidneys don't reabsorb as much water from the filtrate. More water passes through to become urine. This is why, even though you're consuming liquid when you drink alcohol, you can still end up dehydrated. You're losing more fluid in urine than you're taking in. And that fluid loss includes water that would normally be retained. This dehydration contributes to hangover symptoms. Your brain is particularly sensitive to dehydration because even small reductions in brain hydration can affect how it functions. The headache, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating that come with a hangover are partly due to dehydration of brain tissue. But it's not just water balance that's affected. Electrolyte balance gets disrupted too. Your kidneys carefully regulate the concentrations of sodium, potassium, chloride, and other electrolytes in your blood. When alcohol increases urine output, you lose electrolytes along with the water. This is part of why sports drinks or electrolyte solutions can help with hangover symptoms. They replace not just fluid, but also lost electrolytes. Alcohol also affects how your kidneys handle other substances. It can interfere with uric acid excretion, which is why alcohol consumption, particularly beer, is associated with increased risk of gout, a painful form of arthritis caused by uric acid crystal deposits in joints. The increased urine production from alcohol also affects kidney blood flow. Your kidneys are extremely vascular organs. At any moment, they contain about 20% of your body's blood. The blood flow through kidneys is carefully regulated to maintain proper filtration. Alcohol's effects on blood pressure and blood vessel tone can alter kidney blood flow. Though in healthy individuals, the kidneys usually compensate well. Long-term heavy drinking, however, can damage the kidneys. Chronic alcohol use can lead to high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is one of the leading causes of kidney disease. Alcohol can also directly damage kidney tissue. Heavy drinking is associated with increased risk of chronic kidney disease. And for people who already have kidney disease, alcohol can accelerate its progression. There's also the issue of acute kidney injury, which can occur in situations like acute alcohol poisoning, or when someone experiences rhabdomyolysis, the breakdown of muscle tissue that can occur with extreme alcohol intoxication. When muscle tissue breaks down, it releases proteins like myoglobin into the bloodstream, and these can clog the kidney's filtration system, potentially causing acute kidney failure. Your kidneys also play a role in processing the byproducts of alcohol metabolism. Remember acetate, that relatively harmless end product we talked about? Your kidneys help eliminate it. They're part of the cleanup crew for alcohol's metabolic waste products. The kidneys are remarkably resilient organs with substantial reserve capacity. You can function normally with just one kidney, or even with reduced function in both. But this doesn't mean they're immune to alcohol's effects. Over time, repeated exposure to alcohol, particularly in large quantities, can lead to cumulative damage. The delicate filtration structures can become scarred, kidney function can decline, and eventually, serious kidney disease can develop. For now, just picture your kidneys, working constantly, filtering and refiltering your blood, trying to maintain balance while dealing with alcohol's effects on fluid and electrolyte regulation. They're doing their best to keep you in equilibrium, even as alcohol disrupts their normal operation. We started our journey in the digestive system, but let's return now to look at alcohol's broader effects on digestion. Your digestive system is this remarkable tube running through your body, from mouth to anus, but it's much more than just a tube. It's a complex organ system with specialized regions, each with specific functions, all coordinated to break down food, absorb nutrients, and eliminate waste. We've already talked about the stomach and small intestine, but alcohol affects other parts of your digestive system too. Let's start with your esophagus, the muscular tube connecting your mouth to your stomach. The esophagus has a job that seems simple, but requires precise coordination. It needs to propel food and liquid downward through waves of muscular contraction called peristalsis, while preventing stomach contents from coming back up. At the bottom of your esophagus, there's a ring of muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter. This sphincter stays contracted most of the time, acting as a valve to keep stomach acid from flowing backward into the esophagus. Alcohol relaxes this sphincter. When it relaxes, it's easier for acid to reflux backward, which is why drinking can trigger or worsen heartburn and acid reflux. That burning sensation is literally stomach acid touching the lining of your esophagus, which isn't designed to handle acid the way your stomach lining is. Chronic heavy drinking can lead to more serious esophageal problems. The repeated exposure to both alcohol and acid can cause inflammation, esophagitis. The esophageal lining can become damaged, and over time, this can lead to changes in the cells lining the esophagus, a condition called Barrett's esophagus, which increases cancer risk. Your stomach, beyond just absorbing and processing alcohol, has other important functions. It produces acid to help break down food and kill bacteria. It produces mucus to protect its own lining from that acid. It produces enzymes to begin protein digestion, and it churns food mechanically, mixing everything together. Alcohol, especially in high concentrations or large amounts, irritates the stomach lining. It can damage the mucus layer that protects the stomach from its own acid. This can lead to gastritis, inflammation of the stomach lining. If you've ever felt nauseous or had stomach pain after drinking, this is likely why. Your stomach lining is irritated and inflamed. Chronic gastritis from regular heavy drinking can lead to ulcers, actual erosions in the stomach lining where the protective barriers have failed and acid has damaged the tissue underneath. These ulcers can bleed, can cause pain, and can sometimes become serious medical problems requiring treatment. Alcohol also affects your stomach's emptying rate, as we discussed earlier, but this has broader implications for digestion. If your stomach is emptying too quickly, food doesn't get adequately processed. If it's emptying too slowly, you might feel uncomfortably full, nauseous, or bloated. Moving further along, your pancreas plays a crucial role in digestion. The pancreas produces enzymes that flow into your small intestine to break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. It also produces bicarbonate to neutralize stomach acid as food moves into the intestine. And importantly, the pancreas produces insulin and other hormones that regulate blood sugar. Alcohol has significant effects on the pancreas. Heavy drinking can cause acute pancreatitis, sudden inflammation of the pancreas. This is extremely painful and can be life-threatening. The pancreas essentially starts digesting itself with its own enzymes. Chronic heavy drinking can lead to chronic pancreatitis, where the pancreas becomes permanently damaged, scarred, and unable to produce adequate enzymes for digestion or adequate insulin for blood sugar regulation. Your intestines, both small and large, are also affected by alcohol. The small intestine's lining is normally covered with those tiny villi and microvilli we discussed, creating enormous surface area for absorption. But alcohol can damage these structures. It can cause inflammation of the intestinal lining, increase intestinal permeability, sometimes called leaky gut, and interfere with the absorption of nutrients. This is part of why chronic heavy drinkers often develop nutritional deficiencies. It's not just that they might be eating poorly, though that's often a factor. It's also that their intestines aren't absorbing nutrients effectively. Vitamin B1, thiamine, is particularly affected. Thiamine deficiency can lead to serious neurological problems, including a condition called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which involves confusion, coordination problems, and memory impairment. Alcohol affects the gut microbiome too, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines. These bacteria play important roles in digestion, immune function, and even mental health. Alcohol can alter the composition of this bacterial community, potentially reducing beneficial bacteria and allowing harmful ones to proliferate. This dysbiosis, imbalance in gut bacteria, can contribute to inflammation, digestive problems, and may even affect overall health in ways we're still discovering. Your large intestine, or colon, absorbs water from the remaining digestive contents and forms stool. Alcohol affects water absorption here too, which is part of why drinking can sometimes lead to diarrhea. The colon isn't absorbing as much water as it normally would, leaving stool looser and more liquid. The entire digestive system, from top to bottom, is in communication with your brain through what's called the gut-brain axis. Nerves and hormones carry signals back and forth. Alcohol affects this communication, which is part of why drinking affects appetite, digestion rate, and even mood. Your gut and brain are in constant conversation, and alcohol disrupts that dialogue. Let's talk about something you've probably experienced but might not have thought much about: how alcohol affects your body temperature and your skin. Your body maintains its core temperature at about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. This temperature regulation is crucial. Your enzymes, the proteins that run all your body's chemical reactions, work best at this specific temperature. Even small variations can affect how well they function. Your hypothalamus, a small region at the base of your brain, acts as your body's thermostat. It receives information about your core temperature and your skin temperature, and it coordinates responses to keep you in the right range. If you're too hot, it triggers sweating and increases blood flow to your skin to radiate heat away. If you're too cold, it reduces skin blood flow to conserve heat, triggers shivering to generate heat through muscle activity, and can even activate brown fat tissue to produce heat. Alcohol interferes with this temperature regulation in several ways. First, as we've discussed, alcohol causes vasodilation. Blood vessels near your skin surface widen. This brings more warm blood from your core to your skin, where heat is lost to the environment. You feel warm. Your skin feels warm to the touch. You might flush or sweat. But your core temperature is actually dropping. This is why alcohol and cold weather are a dangerous combination. People feel warm and comfortable even as they're losing heat rapidly. Hypothermia can develop without the person realizing it because they don't feel cold. The usual warning signs, feeling cold, shivering, are masked or blunted. Historically, alcohol has contributed to many cases of hypothermia in people who were outdoors in cold weather. In hot weather, alcohol creates a different problem. You're already hot, and now you're vasodilating even more, and you might be sweating excessively. This can accelerate dehydration. Combined with alcohol's diuretic effect, remember, it's suppressing vasopressin, you can become dehydrated quite quickly in hot conditions when drinking. Your skin itself is affected by alcohol beyond just the temperature regulation aspect. Skin is your body's largest organ, covering about 20 square feet in an average adult. It's a barrier protecting you from the environment, preventing water loss, blocking pathogens, providing sensory information, and helping regulate temperature. Alcohol affects skin health in multiple ways. The dehydration it causes affects skin appearance. Dehydrated skin looks less plump, less elastic, more prone to wrinkles. Chronic heavy drinking accelerates skin aging. You might notice that people who drink heavily often look older than their years. Alcohol also dilates blood vessels in the skin. While this is temporary in the short term, chronic heavy drinking can make these changes more permanent. Tiny blood vessels in the face can become permanently enlarged, creating a condition called telangiectasia, visible red or purple spiderweb patterns on the cheeks and nose. This is sometimes called alcoholic nose, or drinker's nose, though the medical term is rhinophyma when it's severe. Alcohol affects skin inflammation too. For people with inflammatory skin conditions like rosacea, psoriasis, or eczema, alcohol often makes these conditions worse. This happens partly through effects on the immune system and partly through direct effects on skin cells and blood vessels. There's also an increased risk of skin infections with heavy drinking. Alcohol impairs immune function, making it harder for your body to fight off bacteria and fungi. The skin's normal defenses, its slightly acidic pH, its bacterial microbiome, the immune cells that patrol just beneath the surface, all become less effective. Wound healing is impaired by alcohol too. When you have a cut or scrape, healing involves a complex sequence of events: inflammation, cell proliferation, and tissue remodeling. Alcohol interferes with multiple steps in this process. It affects the immune cells that clean the wound, the growth factors that stimulate new tissue formation, and the collagen production that gives healed tissue its strength. Some skin reactions to alcohol are actually allergic or hypersensitivity responses. Some people develop hives, itching, or flushing from drinking. This can be a true allergy to components in alcoholic beverages, proteins from grains or grapes, for instance. Or it can be a sensitivity to histamine, which is present in fermented drinks like wine and beer. Or it could be that genetic variation in ALDH we discussed earlier, where acetaldehyde accumulates and triggers histamine release, causing flushing and other symptoms. Your sweat glands are also affected by alcohol. You might sweat more when drinking, partly from vasodilation and temperature changes, partly from alcohol's direct effects on sweat glands. And the composition of sweat can change too. As alcohol is metabolized, some alcohol and acetate are excreted in sweat, which can give sweat a distinctive odor. This is different from smelling like alcohol, in the sense of beverage alcohol on your breath. This is metabolites coming out through your skin. The texture and oiliness of skin can change with drinking too. Alcohol affects hormone levels, which affects sebum production, the oils your skin produces. Some people's skin becomes more oily, others become drier. These effects are individual and can depend on many factors. Think about your skin right now, wherever you are. It's doing all these jobs constantly, and when alcohol is in your system, it's trying to do them all while dealing with alcohol's effects on blood flow, hydration, temperature, and healing. Your skin is resilient, but like all your organs, it responds to what you put in your body. Let's explore how alcohol affects your immune system, your body's defense network against infections, diseases, and anything else that might harm you. Your immune system is extraordinarily complex, involving multiple types of cells, organs, and chemical signals, all coordinating to protect you from threats while avoiding attacking your own tissues. Your immune system has two main branches. There's innate immunity, your first line of defense, including physical barriers like skin, chemical barriers like stomach acid, and cells that attack any invader they recognize as foreign. This system is fast but non-specific. Then there's adaptive immunity, the specialized response involving B cells and T cells that create specific antibodies and immune memory for particular pathogens. This system is slower to develop but incredibly precise and creates long-lasting protection. Alcohol affects both branches of your immune system, and the effects depend on how much and how often you drink. Even a single episode of heavy drinking can suppress immune function for up to 24 hours afterward. Your white blood cells, the soldiers of your immune system, become less effective at recognizing and attacking threats. Let's start with those physical barriers. We've already talked about how alcohol damages the lining of your digestive tract. This barrier is part of your immune system. Your gut lining doesn't just absorb nutrients, it also keeps bacteria and toxins from entering your bloodstream. When alcohol damages this barrier, making it more permeable, bacteria and bacterial products like endotoxins can pass through into your blood. This triggers inflammation throughout your body, as your immune system responds to these invaders. Your respiratory tract has its own defenses too. The airways are lined with cilia, tiny hair-like structures that wave back and forth, moving mucus and trapped particles upward and out of your lungs. Alcohol impairs ciliary function. These cilia don't beat as effectively, which means your lungs can't clear particles and bacteria as efficiently. This is one reason why people who drink heavily are more susceptible to pneumonia and other respiratory infections. Your white blood cells are the active immune defenders, and there are several types, each with specialized roles. Neutrophils are abundant white blood cells that quickly arrive at infection sites and engulf bacteria. Alcohol impairs neutrophil function. They don't move toward infection sites as quickly, don't engulf and kill bacteria as effectively, and don't produce the reactive oxygen species they normally use as weapons against pathogens. Macrophages are larger immune cells that engulf pathogens and cellular debris, and they also coordinate immune responses by releasing chemical signals. Alcohol affects macrophage function too. Macrophages don't present antigens, pieces of pathogens, to other immune cells as effectively, which impairs the development of specific immune responses. T cells are crucial for adaptive immunity. There are several types. Helper. T cells coordinate immune responses. Cytotoxic T cells directly kill infected cells, and regulatory T cells prevent autoimmune reactions. Alcohol affects T cell numbers and function. With chronic heavy drinking, T cell responses become blunted. This means your body is less able to develop strong, specific immune responses to new infections. B cells produce antibodies, Y-shaped proteins that stick to specific pathogens and mark them for destruction. Alcohol affects B cell development and antibody production. People who drink heavily often produce fewer antibodies in response to infections or vaccines. This is why vaccines might be less effective in heavy drinkers. Natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte that attacks virus-infected cells and cancer cells. They're part of your body's surveillance system, constantly patrolling for cells that have become infected or transformed. Alcohol reduces natural killer cell activity, making your body less able to fight viral infections and potentially less able to eliminate cancer cells before they establish tumors. The chemical signals immune cells use to communicate, cytokines, are also affected by alcohol. Some cytokines promote inflammation, while others resolve it. Alcohol disrupts this balance. Acute drinking can suppress certain pro-inflammatory cytokines, which might sound good, but actually makes you more vulnerable to infections. Chronic heavy drinking, on the other hand, can lead to persistent elevation of inflammatory cytokines, contributing to chronic inflammation throughout the body. This chronic inflammation is particularly problematic. While acute inflammation is how your body responds to injury and infection, chronic low-grade inflammation contributes to many diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and neurodegeneration. Heavy alcohol use promotes this type of harmful, persistent inflammation. The thymus and bone marrow, where immune cells develop, are sensitive to alcohol too. The thymus, where T cells mature, can atrophy with chronic alcohol exposure. Bone marrow, where all blood cells, including immune cells, originate, shows impaired function with heavy drinking. This means fewer new immune cells are being produced, and the ones that are produced might not function as well. Alcohol also affects the complement system, a group of proteins in your blood that work together to kill bacteria and infected cells. These proteins normally form a cascade, each activating the next in a precise sequence. Alcohol can interfere with this cascade, reducing its effectiveness. The effects aren't just about fighting infections. Your immune system also monitors for cancer cells, and chronic heavy drinking is associated with increased risk of several types of cancer. This is partly due to direct carcinogenic effects of alcohol and its metabolites, but immune suppression plays a role too. Your immune system normally eliminates many abnormal cells before they become cancer, and when this surveillance is impaired, cancer risk increases. Now let's dive into how alcohol affects your hormones and metabolism. Hormones are chemical messengers that travel through your bloodstream, carrying signals from glands to target organs and tissues. They regulate growth, metabolism, reproduction, mood, and countless other functions. And alcohol affects multiple hormonal systems simultaneously. Let's start with cortisol, often called the stress hormone. Cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. Under normal circumstances, cortisol follows a daily rhythm. Highest in the morning to help you wake up, lowest at night. Cortisol helps regulate metabolism, blood sugar, blood pressure, and immune function. It's released in response to stress, preparing your body for the fight or flight response. Alcohol increases cortisol levels. Your body perceives alcohol as a stressor, and your HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system that controls stress responses, gets activated. Cortisol levels rise, which mobilizes energy stores, suppresses digestion, and affects immune function. This is part of why drinking affects your metabolism and can interfere with sleep even though alcohol is sedating. With chronic heavy drinking, the HPA axis becomes dysregulated. Cortisol levels might stay elevated, or the normal rhythm gets disrupted. This persistent elevation of cortisol has numerous negative effects, including contributing to belly fat accumulation, insulin resistance, bone loss, and impaired immune function. Speaking of insulin, let's talk about blood sugar regulation. Your pancreas produces insulin in response to rising blood sugar. Insulin tells your cells to take up glucose from the blood, bringing blood sugar back down. This system is crucial for preventing both dangerously high and dangerously low blood sugar. Alcohol affects blood sugar in complex ways. If you drink without eating, alcohol can cause hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. This happens because your liver is so busy metabolizing alcohol that it can't perform gluconeogenesis, making new glucose as effectively. Your liver normally maintains blood sugar between meals by producing glucose, but alcohol metabolism interferes with this. If your blood sugar drops too low, you can feel shaky, confused, sweaty, or even lose consciousness. On the other hand, many alcoholic beverages contain carbohydrates that raise blood sugar. Beer, sweet wines, and mixed drinks with juice or soda add sugar to your system. And alcohol consumption, especially chronic heavy drinking, can contribute to insulin resistance, where your cells don't respond to insulin as effectively, leading to higher blood sugar levels over time. This is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Let's talk about sex hormones. In men, alcohol affects testosterone levels. Acute drinking can lower testosterone temporarily. Chronic heavy drinking can lead to more persistent low testosterone, which affects libido, erectile function, muscle mass, bone density, and mood. Alcohol also affects the conversion of testosterone to estrogen, which can lead to feminization effects in heavy drinking men, breast enlargement, fat redistribution, and reduced body hair. The mechanisms are multiple. Alcohol directly affects the Leydig cells in the testes that produce testosterone. It affects the hypothalamus and pituitary, which produce hormones that regulate the testes. And it affects the liver, where sex hormones are metabolized, potentially allowing estrogen levels to rise because the liver isn't clearing it as effectively. In women, alcohol affects the menstrual cycle and reproductive hormones. It can alter levels of estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle-stimulating hormone. These disruptions can lead to irregular cycles, fertility problems, and increased risk of breast cancer. Elevated estrogen levels are a known breast cancer risk factor. Alcohol affects thyroid function too. Your thyroid produces hormones that regulate metabolism, heart rate, body temperature, and many other functions. Alcohol can interfere with thyroid hormone production and also affect how these hormones are metabolized and cleared from your body. Chronic heavy drinking is associated with thyroid dysfunction, which can manifest as fatigue, weight changes, mood problems, and other symptoms. Growth hormone, produced by your pituitary gland, is important for tissue repair, muscle growth, and metabolism. Alcohol suppresses growth hormone secretion, particularly during sleep when growth hormone is normally released in pulses. This is one reason why alcohol interferes with recovery from exercise and with overall tissue repair. Prolactin, another pituitary hormone, is elevated by alcohol. Prolactin normally stimulates milk production in nursing women, but elevated prolactin in men, or non-nursing women, can cause various problems including sexual dysfunction, breast enlargement, and bone loss. Your metabolism itself is fundamentally altered by alcohol. Remember that alcohol provides calories, 7 calories per gram, more than carbohydrates or protein. But these are often called empty calories because alcohol provides energy, but no nutrients. When you drink, Your body prioritizes metabolizing alcohol over other fuels. Fat burning essentially stops while alcohol is being processed. Your body sees alcohol as a toxin that needs to be eliminated, so it becomes the priority fuel source. This metabolic shift has implications for weight and body composition. The calories from alcohol are often stored as fat, particularly around the abdomen. And since your body stops burning fat while metabolizing alcohol, any fat you ate with or before drinks is more likely to be stored rather than burned. Alcohol affects hunger regulation hormones too. Leptin, which signals fullness, and ghrelin, which signals hunger, are both affected by drinking. This is part of why people often eat more when drinking. The normal satiety signals aren't working as they should. Let's talk about something that might seem counterintuitive: how alcohol affects sleep. Many people use alcohol to help them fall asleep, and it often does help with sleep onset. You feel drowsy, you fall asleep more quickly, and initially, you might sleep deeply. But what's actually happening to your sleep is more complicated and less beneficial than it seems. Sleep isn't just one uniform state. When you sleep, you cycle through different stages repeatedly throughout the night. Each complete cycle takes about 90 minutes, and you go through 4 to 6 cycles in a full night's sleep. These stages serve different functions and are all important for health. There's light sleep, stages 1 and 2 of non-REM sleep, where you're asleep but can be easily awakened. Then there's deep sleep, stage 3 of non-REM sleep, also called slow wave sleep because of the slow brain waves visible on an EEG. This is where the most restorative processes happen. Growth hormone is released, tissue repair occurs, immune function is enhanced, and memories are consolidated. Then there's a REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. This is where most vivid dreaming occurs. Your brain is highly active, almost as active as when you're awake, but your body is essentially paralyzed except for your eyes, which move rapidly beneath your eyelids. REM sleep is crucial for emotional regulation, memory consolidation, and learning. Alcohol significantly disrupts this sleep architecture. When you drink before bed, you fall asleep faster because alcohol is a sedative. It enhances GABA activity and suppresses arousal systems in your brain. In the first half of the night, you might have more deep, slow-wave sleep than usual. This sounds good, but it's coming at a cost. Alcohol powerfully suppresses REM sleep, especially during the first half of the night. The normal pattern would be short REM periods early in the night, growing longer toward morning. But with alcohol in your system, REM is suppressed or even absent initially. Your brain is essentially too sedated to enter REM sleep properly. As the night progresses and your body metabolizes the alcohol, several things happen. First, you get a rebound effect. Your brain tries to make up for lost REM sleep, and you might have intense, vivid, sometimes disturbing dreams in the second half of the night. But this REM rebound is fragmented and not as restorative as normal REM sleep. Second, as alcohol wears off, you experience what's essentially a mini withdrawal. Remember, your brain adapted to alcohol's presence by adjusting neurotransmitter systems. As alcohol leaves your system, you're temporarily out of balance in the opposite direction. This can cause nighttime awakenings. You might wake up in the early morning hours and have difficulty getting back to sleep. The sleep you do get isn't as restorative as natural sleep. Even though you might be unconscious for 7 or 8 hours, the quality of that sleep is reduced. Brain activity patterns are different. The normal cycling through sleep stages is disrupted. You're not getting the full benefit of sleep's restorative processes. This is why people often feel unrested even after a full night's sleep following drinking. It's not just the hangover symptoms, dehydration, headache, nausea. It's that your sleep itself wasn't high quality. Your brain didn't get the full complement of REM sleep it needed. Your body didn't get uninterrupted time in deep sleep for optimal repair and restoration. There's also increased nighttime awakening. Alcohol affects your bladder, as we discussed, so you might wake to urinate. It affects breathing. Alcohol relaxes muscles throughout your body, including throat muscles, which can worsen snoring and sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is where breathing stops temporarily during sleep, reducing oxygen levels and fragmenting sleep as your brain partially wakes you to restart breathing. Body temperature regulation during sleep is affected too. Normally, your core temperature drops during sleep, This drop in temperature is actually part of the signal that maintains sleep. Alcohol's effects on temperature regulation can interfere with this, contributing to disturbed sleep. The rebound effect from alcohol doesn't just affect REM sleep. In the days following heavy drinking, sleep can remain disrupted even without additional alcohol. Your brain's sleep systems are trying to recalibrate. This is part of why recovery from heavy drinking involves not just feeling physically better, but also several nights of poor sleep before normal sleep patterns return. Chronic regular drinking creates more persistent sleep problems. People who drink regularly often develop insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, or staying asleep. They might use alcohol to help them fall asleep, which works temporarily, but makes the underlying problem worse. It becomes a cycle. Poor sleep leads to drinking to sleep. Drinking disrupts sleep quality. Poor sleep quality leads to more drinking. There's also the timing issue. Drinking earlier in the evening allows more time for alcohol to be metabolized before sleep, reducing some of these effects. Drinking right before bed means alcohol levels are highest during the early part of sleep, maximizing the disruption to sleep architecture. Even moderate amounts of alcohol affect sleep. You don't have to be heavily intoxicated to experience disrupted REM sleep and fragmented sleep in the second half of the night. Studies show measurable sleep disruption even from 1 or 2 drinks. Your brain needs sleep. It's not optional or negotiable. During sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. It consolidates memories, processes emotions, and performs maintenance on neural circuits. When alcohol disrupts sleep, all of these crucial functions are impaired. Let's explore in more depth how alcohol affects your thinking, learning, and memory. We've touched on the brain already, but let's focus specifically on cognitive functions, the mental processes that allow you to interact with the world, process information, make decisions, and remember experiences. Your brain has about 86 billion neurons, and each neuron can have thousands of connections to other neurons. These connections, synapses, are where learning and memory happen. When you learn something new, certain synapses strengthen. When you practice a skill, specific neural pathways become more efficient. Your brain is constantly changing based on experience, a property called neuroplasticity. Alcohol affects this plasticity. In the short term, it impairs your ability to form new memories. We mentioned blackouts before, the most dramatic form of memory impairment. But even at lower blood alcohol levels where blackouts don't occur, memory formation is impaired. You might have difficulty remembering details of conversations, events, or information you learned while drinking. This happens partly through alcohol's effects on the hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure crucial for memory formation. The hippocampus has a process called long-term potentiation, LTP, where synapses strengthen when they're repeatedly activated together. This is thought to be a cellular basis of learning and memory. Alcohol interferes with LTP, making it harder for new memories to form. There's also working memory to consider. Working memory is your mental workspace, the information you hold in mind while performing tasks. When you do mental arithmetic, follow directions, or have a conversation, you're using working memory. Alcohol impairs working memory capacity. You can hold fewer pieces of information in mind simultaneously, and you're more easily distracted by irrelevant information. Attention is affected too. Normally, you can direct your attention selectively, focusing on relevant information while filtering out distractions. Alcohol reduces this selective attention. Everything becomes slightly more distracting. Maintaining focus requires more effort. This is part of why complex tasks become more difficult when drinking. The mental resources needed for concentration and selective attention are compromised. Executive functions, higher-order cognitive processes like planning, decision-making, impulse control, and flexible thinking, are particularly sensitive to alcohol. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain region most involved in executive function, is significantly affected by alcohol even at relatively low doses. This is why judgment becomes impaired. You're less able to think through consequences, less able to inhibit impulses, less able to adjust plans when circumstances change. Reaction time slows under alcohol's influence. This isn't just about physical reactions, it's cognitive too. The time it takes to perceive a stimulus, decide on a response, and initiate that response all increase. This might be a fraction of a second, but in situations requiring quick responses, like driving, that delay is significant. Speech and language are affected in interesting ways. Language production becomes less precise. You might have difficulty finding the right word, articulating clearly, or organizing thoughts into coherent sentences. This is partly motor. Alcohol affects the muscles involved in speech, but it's also cognitive. The mental processes of selecting words, constructing grammatically correct sentences, and organizing ideas into logical sequences all become more effortful. Comprehension can be affected too. Understanding complex language, following multi-step instructions, or grasping subtle meanings becomes harder. You might need to hear things repeated, or you might misunderstand what someone meant. Spatial reasoning. Understanding relationships between objects in space is impaired by alcohol. This affects everything from navigating through a crowded room to judging distances when driving. Your mental model of the spatial environment becomes less accurate. Problem-solving abilities decline. When faced with a problem, you generate solutions, evaluate them, and select the best option. Alcohol affects all parts of this process. You generate fewer potential solutions, evaluate them less thoroughly, and are more likely to perseverate on ineffective strategies rather than trying new approaches. Let's talk about long-term effects now. Heavy drinking over time can cause persistent cognitive impairment. Brain imaging studies show that chronic heavy drinkers have reduced brain volume, particularly in the prefrontal cortex and other areas crucial for higher cognition. Some of this damage is reversible if drinking stops, but some may be permanent. Alcohol-related brain damage can result from several mechanisms. There's the direct toxic effect of alcohol and acetaldehyde on neurons. There's thiamine deficiency, which we mentioned earlier, leading to Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, a condition involving severe memory problems, confusion, and coordination difficulties. There's repeated head trauma, which is more common in people who drink heavily and have falls or accidents. And there's the effect of repeated withdrawal episodes, which can be neurotoxic. Cognitive recovery after stopping drinking is variable. Many cognitive functions improve significantly in the weeks and months after cessation. The brain shows remarkable recovery capacity. Memory, attention, and executive function can all improve substantially. But some impairments may persist, particularly if drinking was very heavy and prolonged, or if significant nutritional deficiencies or repeated head trauma occurred. Even moderate drinking over long periods may have subtle effects on cognition, though this is still being researched. Some studies suggest even moderate alcohol consumption is associated with increased risk of dementia and cognitive decline in older age, though other studies have shown mixed results. Now let's discuss something that might explain why alcohol affects people so differently: genetics and individual variation. You've probably noticed that people react to alcohol in remarkably different ways. Some people get flushed after one drink. Others can drink much more with seemingly less effect. Some people become sleepy, others energized. Some develop alcohol problems easily. Others can take it or leave it. Much of this variation comes down to genes. Let's start with those enzymes we discussed earlier: alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase, ADH and ALDH. The genes that code for these enzymes come in different variants, and these variants affect how quickly you metabolize alcohol and acetaldehyde. Some variants of ADH work faster than the typical version. If you have fast ADH, you convert alcohol to acetaldehyde more quickly. Some variants of ALDH work more slowly, or barely work at all. If you have slow or non-functional ALDH, acetaldehyde accumulates. Remember, acetaldehyde is more toxic than alcohol itself, and it causes those unpleasant flushing reactions: facial redness, rapid heartbeat, nausea, headache. These genetic variants are most common in people of East Asian descent. About 30 to 50% of people of East Asian heritage have the non-functional ALDH variant. When they drink, even small amounts cause uncomfortable flushing reactions. This genetic variant is actually protective against alcohol use disorder. People with this variant are much less likely to develop problems with drinking, because drinking is unpleasant for them. There are other populations with different frequencies of these gene variants too. The point is that the rate at which your body processes alcohol and its toxic metabolite is partly determined by genetics you inherited from your parents. But metabolism is just one piece. There are genes affecting how your brain responds to alcohol. Neurotransmitter receptors, those GABA receptors, glutamate receptors, dopamine receptors we talked about, come in different forms based on genetic variation. These differences affect how sensitive your brain is to alcohol's effects. Some people have genetic variants that make them more sensitive to alcohol's rewarding effects. They get a stronger dopamine response from drinking. Others might be less sensitive to alcohol's sedating effects, so they can drink more before feeling tired. These differences in brain response influence drinking behavior and risk for developing alcohol problems. There's also genetic variation in how people experience hangovers. Some people get terrible hangovers from modest drinking. Others can drink quite a bit with minimal hangover. This isn't just about hydration or what you ate. There are genetic factors affecting inflammation, oxidative stress, and other processes that contribute to hangover symptoms. Genetics influences risk for alcohol use disorder, alcoholism. Decades of research involving family studies, twin studies, and adoption studies have shown that genetics accounts for about 50% of the risk for developing alcohol problems. If you have a parent or sibling with alcohol use disorder, your risk is significantly higher than someone without that family history. But this isn't a single gene. It's many genes, each contributing a small amount to overall risk. Some affect metabolism, some affect brain responses, some affect impulsivity and decision-making, some affect stress responses. It's polygenic, many genes interacting, and those genes interact with environmental factors like stress, trauma, social environment, and availability of alcohol. Sex differences are important too, though these are partly genetic and partly hormonal. Women typically have lower body water content than men of the same size, meaning the same amount of alcohol produces higher blood alcohol concentration. Women typically have less stomach ADH, so more alcohol enters the bloodstream unmetabolized. And women's hormonal fluctuations across the menstrual cycle can affect alcohol metabolism and sensitivity. Women also face different health consequences from alcohol. For the same level of drinking, women develop liver disease, heart problems, and cognitive impairment more quickly than men. This isn't about being weaker. It's about biological differences in how alcohol is processed and how it affects tissues. Age matters significantly. Teenagers and young adults are still experiencing brain development, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, that region crucial for judgment and impulse control. Alcohol exposure during this developmental period can have more lasting effects on brain structure and function than the same exposure in adulthood. Older adults face different issues. As you age, body composition changes, typically less muscle mass, more fat tissue, less total body water. This means alcohol is less diluted, producing higher blood alcohol levels. Metabolism tends to slow. The brain may be more sensitive to alcohol's effects, and older adults are more likely to be taking medications that interact with alcohol. Body size and composition matter too. A larger person generally has more body water to dilute alcohol, producing lower blood alcohol levels from the same amount of alcohol. Someone with more muscle mass and less fat tissue will dilute alcohol more than someone of the same weight but different composition. Then there's tolerance, both acute and chronic. Acute tolerance is when effects diminish during a single drinking episode. Your blood alcohol might be the same on the way up and the way down, but you feel more impaired when it's rising than when it's falling. Chronic tolerance develops with regular drinking. You need more alcohol to achieve the same effect because your brain has adapted. But remember, tolerance to subjective effects doesn't mean tolerance to all effects. Your liver is still being damaged. Your risk of accidents is still elevated, even if you don't feel as impaired. Let's talk about how alcohol affects behavior and social interaction. Alcohol is often called a social lubricant, and there's neurochemistry behind this common observation. When you drink, especially in social settings, several psychological and physiological changes occur that affect how you relate to others. First, there's anxiety reduction. We've discussed how alcohol enhances GABA and reduces glutamate activity, dampening overall brain excitation. The brain regions involved in anxiety, threat detection, and social fear become less active. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, responds less strongly to potential threats, including social threats like judgment or rejection. This reduction in social anxiety is one reason people often feel more comfortable, more outgoing, more willing to approach others and start conversations when they've been drinking. But here's something interesting. This anxiety reduction is partly pharmacological and partly psychological. The expectation that alcohol will make you less anxious actually contributes to the effect. Studies where people are given drinks they're told contain alcohol, but actually don't, show that some anxiety reduction happens from expectation alone. The actual presence of alcohol adds to this effect, but belief and expectation play meaningful roles. Self-consciousness decreases with alcohol, that internal monitor that's always evaluating how you're coming across, what people might be thinking about you, whether you're saying the right thing. It quiets down. The prefrontal regions involved in self-monitoring and self-awareness become less active. This can be freeing. People often report feeling more like themselves, less inhibited, more authentic when drinking. But it can also lead to behavior you later regret, because that same self-monitoring system normally helps you modulate behavior to suit the situation. Empathy and emotional processing are affected too. Reading other people's emotions, particularly subtle emotional cues, becomes more difficult when drinking. You might misinterpret someone's facial expression or tone of voice. You might not notice that your friend is uncomfortable or that your joke offended someone. The brain regions involved in social cognition and theory of mind, understanding others' mental states, don't function as precisely under alcohol's influence. Mood effects are complex and variable. Many people experience mood elevation when drinking, feeling happier, more cheerful, less burdened by worries. This comes partly from alcohol's effects on dopamine and endogenous opioids in reward circuits. But mood effects vary tremendously between people and situations. Some people become sad or angry when drinking. Some experience mood swings. The baseline emotional state when you start drinking, your environment, who you're with, and your individual neurochemistry all influence how alcohol affects mood. Aggression is more likely under alcohol's influence. Statistically, alcohol is involved in a large percentage of violent incidents. The reasons are multifaceted. Impaired prefrontal function means less ability to control impulses and consider consequences. Attention becomes narrowed, focusing on immediate provocations rather than the bigger picture. This is called alcohol myopia. Misinterpretation of social cues can lead to perceiving threat or disrespect where none was intended. And in some individuals, alcohol seems to particularly affect brain regions involved in aggression regulation. Sexual behavior is affected in several ways. Alcohol reduces inhibitions, which can lead to sexual activity that wouldn't occur when sober. Judgment is impaired, affecting decisions about consent, protection, and partner selection. There's also a physiological paradox here. Alcohol might increase desire or reduce inhibitions, but it actually impairs sexual function. In men, alcohol can cause difficulty achieving or maintaining erection. In women, it can reduce physiological arousal and make orgasm more difficult. The nervous system control of sexual response is impaired by alcohol's effects on both central and peripheral nervous systems. Risk-taking increases with alcohol. This has been demonstrated in countless studies using gambling tasks, driving simulations, and real-world observations. When your prefrontal cortex, your brain's risk assessment system, is impaired, you become more willing to take chances you normally wouldn't. The potential rewards seem more attractive. The potential consequences seem less likely or less severe. This affects everything from agreeing to a dare, to driving when you shouldn't, to making financial decisions. There's something called alcohol expectancy effects. How we expect alcohol to affect us shapes how it actually affects us to some degree. If you expect alcohol to make you aggressive, you're more likely to become aggressive when drinking. If you expect it to make you confident, you're more likely to feel confident. These expectancies are learned through culture, media, and personal experience, and they interact with alcohol's pharmacological effects. The social context of drinking matters enormously. Drinking alone feels different from drinking with close friends, which feels different from drinking at a party with strangers. Your brain is constantly processing social information. Who's present, what the social rules are, what's expected of you. And this processing affects how alcohol's effects manifest. This is why the same amount of alcohol can produce quite different subjective experiences in different social situations. Let's not forget about alcohol's effects on sleep in social contexts. Late-night drinking might seem like it extends social time, but it's borrowing from tomorrow. The disrupted sleep we discussed means impaired mood, cognition, and social functioning the next day. Those connections and conversations that felt so meaningful at 2 in the morning might be poorly remembered or even completely forgotten. Alcohol affects group dynamics too. Social groups often develop drinking norms and patterns. Peer influence is powerful, particularly in young adults. People tend to drink more in groups than alone, and they tend to match their drinking pace to others in the group. Let's return to the liver one more time and really understand what happens to this remarkable organ with sustained alcohol exposure. Your liver is probably the most forgiving organ you have. It can take tremendous abuse and still function. It can regenerate from severe damage. But there are limits, and understanding what happens to the liver over time with heavy drinking gives us a window into how profoundly alcohol can affect the body. When someone drinks heavily regularly, the liver is constantly working overtime to process alcohol. Remember, your liver can handle about 1 standard drink per hour. When you drink more than this consistently, your liver never gets a break. It's always in alcohol processing mode, and this constant demand creates problems. The first stage of alcohol-related liver disease is fatty liver, or hepatic steatosis. This develops in most people who drink heavily, and it can develop quite quickly, even within a few weeks of heavy drinking. Fat accumulates in liver cells because alcohol metabolism disrupts normal fat processing. Remember how alcohol uses up NAD+? This depletion affects fat metabolism pathways. Additionally, alcohol increases fat synthesis and decreases fat breakdown. The result is that fat droplets accumulate inside liver cells. If you looked at liver tissue from someone with fatty liver under a microscope, you'd see liver cells bloated with fat droplets, sometimes pushing the nucleus to the side. The liver becomes enlarged and heavier. It might be detectable on physical exam or imaging, but often it causes no symptoms at all. And here's the hopeful part. Fatty liver is reversible. If drinking stops, the fat gradually clears, and the liver returns to normal. The liver forgives this early insult. But if heavy drinking continues, the next stage can develop: alcoholic hepatitis. This is inflammation of the liver. The constant exposure to alcohol and acetaldehyde, combined with oxidative stress and other factors, triggers an inflammatory response. Immune cells infiltrate the liver tissue. Liver cells become damaged and die. Now there might be symptoms: fatigue, nausea, pain in the upper right abdomen, jaundice where skin and eyes turn yellow because the liver can't process bilirubin properly, fever. Alcoholic hepatitis can range from mild to severe. In mild cases, stopping drinking and proper nutrition allow recovery. In severe cases, it can be life-threatening. The liver's synthetic functions, producing proteins like albumin and clotting factors, become impaired. Bilirubin accumulates, causing jaundice. Ammonia builds up, potentially causing confusion or even coma. This is acute liver failure, and it requires intensive medical care. If someone survives acute alcoholic hepatitis but continues drinking, or even if they experience repeated episodes of milder inflammation, the next stage develops: cirrhosis. This is where liver tissue becomes scarred. Cirrhosis is irreversible. The normal organized architecture of the liver, with blood flowing through sinusoids past cords of liver cells, gets disrupted. Scar tissue, fibrosis, replaces functional tissue. Regenerative nodules of liver cells form, but they're not organized properly, not supplied with blood normally. Cirrhosis is serious because it affects the liver's ability to function and because it disrupts blood flow through the liver. Blood that normally flows from the intestines through the liver and then back to the heart can't flow through the scarred tissue as easily. Pressure builds up in the portal vein, the vein bringing blood from the digestive organs to the liver. This is portal hypertension. Portal hypertension causes several problems. Blood backs up in the veins of the esophagus and stomach, causing them to swell. These are varices, and they can rupture and cause massive bleeding. Fluid leaks out of blood vessels and accumulates in the abdomen, ascites. Blood bypasses the liver through alternative routes, meaning toxins that should be filtered by the liver, like ammonia, reach the brain, causing hepatic encephalopathy, a condition of confusion and altered consciousness. The liver's synthetic functions decline with cirrhosis. Less albumin is produced, contributing to fluid retention and swelling. Fewer clotting factors are produced, leading to easy bruising and bleeding. Bilirubin isn't cleared properly, causing persistent jaundice. Hormones aren't metabolized normally, leading to hormonal imbalances. Cirrhosis also dramatically increases the risk of liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma. The constant cycle of damage and attempted regeneration creates opportunities for genetic mutations that lead to cancer. Liver cancer in the context of cirrhosis is difficult to treat and has a poor prognosis. The progression from fatty liver through hepatitis to cirrhosis doesn't happen to everyone who drinks heavily, and the timeline varies. Some people develop cirrhosis after 10 or 15 years of heavy drinking. Others might drink heavily for decades and only develop fatty liver. Genetics play a role, as does nutrition, obesity, viral hepatitis infection, and other factors. Women develop liver disease at lower levels of drinking and after shorter durations than men. There's a concept called the liver's reserve capacity. Your liver has tremendous reserve. You can lose a significant portion of liver function before symptoms appear. People with early cirrhosis might have few or no symptoms. The liver just quietly compensates, working harder with its remaining functional tissue. But eventually, that reserve is exhausted, and liver function becomes inadequate. This is when symptoms become obvious and complications develop. Even with cirrhosis, stopping drinking makes a difference. While the scarring can't be reversed, the liver can still regenerate to some degree. Inflammation can resolve, and the progression can be halted or at least slowed. Some liver function can be regained. Stopping drinking remains the single most important thing someone with alcohol-related liver disease can do. Let's discuss something that many people don't fully realize. Alcohol is a carcinogen. This isn't speculation or controversy. Major health organizations, including the World Health Organization and the International Agency for Research on Cancer, classify alcohol as a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning there's sufficient evidence that it causes cancer in humans. Understanding how and why this happens helps us see another dimension of alcohol's effects on the body. Alcohol increases the risk of several types of cancer: mouth, throat, larynx, esophagus, liver, colon, rectum, and breast. The risk increases with the amount of alcohol consumed. There's no completely safe level. Even light drinking appears to carry some increased cancer risk, though risk rises substantially with heavier drinking. Let's understand the mechanisms. First, there's acetaldehyde, that toxic metabolite we've talked about before. When alcohol is broken down in your body, acetaldehyde forms, and this compound is directly carcinogenic. It damages DNA by binding to it and creating DNA adducts, abnormal structures that interfere with normal DNA replication and repair. When DNA is damaged, and those damages aren't properly repaired, mutations can accumulate in cells. Most of the time, these mutations are harmless, or the cell dies. But sometimes, mutations occur in genes that control cell growth and division, and that's when cancer can develop. Acetaldehyde is particularly concentrated in saliva when you drink. Bacteria in your mouth convert alcohol to acetaldehyde, so your mouth, throat, and esophagus are exposed to high concentrations. This helps explain why cancers of the oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, and esophagus are so strongly associated with alcohol consumption. But acetaldehyde isn't the only mechanism. Alcohol acts as a solvent, making tissues more permeable. In your mouth and throat, this increased permeability allows other carcinogens, like those from tobacco smoke if someone smokes, to penetrate tissues more easily. This is why the combination of alcohol and tobacco is particularly dangerous. The risk isn't just additive, it's multiplicative. Each substance amplifies the carcinogenic effects of the other. Alcohol affects hormone levels, particularly estrogen, and this contributes to breast cancer risk. Alcohol increases estrogen levels through several pathways. It affects how the liver metabolizes estrogen, leaving more circulating in the blood. It might affect estrogen production in other tissues. And elevated estrogen exposure over time increases breast cancer risk. This is one reason why even moderate drinking, just 1 drink per day, has been associated with increased breast cancer risk in women. Oxidative stress is another mechanism. When alcohol is metabolized, it generates reactive oxygen species, free radicals. These highly reactive molecules can damage DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. Your body has antioxidant defenses to neutralize these free radicals, but chronic heavy drinking overwhelms these defenses. The cumulative oxidative damage contributes to cancer development. Alcohol impairs nutrient absorption and utilization, particularly folate, a B vitamin crucial for DNA synthesis and repair. When folate levels are low, DNA is more vulnerable to damage and mutations. Heavy drinkers often have folate deficiency, and this deficiency has been specifically linked to increased risk of colorectal cancer and breast cancer. The immune system plays a critical role in cancer prevention. We've discussed how alcohol impairs immune function. Part of your immune system's job is surveillance, constantly monitoring for cells that have become cancerous and eliminating them before they can grow into tumors. When immune surveillance is impaired by chronic alcohol exposure, abnormal cells are more likely to escape detection and destruction, allowing cancers to develop. Liver cancer specifically develops through a different pathway in many cases. Chronic liver inflammation and cirrhosis from alcohol create an environment where cancer is more likely to emerge. The constant cycle of liver cell death and regeneration that happens with ongoing liver damage increases the chance of mutations occurring during cell division. Cirrhotic liver tissue is far more likely to develop cancer than healthy liver tissue. For colorectal cancer, alcohol's effects on the gut are important. Alcohol damages the intestinal lining, increases permeability, and alters the gut microbiome. It affects the mucosal barrier that normally protects intestinal tissue from carcinogens in the gut. And acetaldehyde produced by gut bacteria from alcohol creates direct DNA damage in colon and rectal tissue. The dose-response relationship is important to understand. Cancer risk increases with the amount of alcohol consumed, but it's not linear. It accelerates at higher consumption levels. Light drinking carries some increased risk. Moderate drinking carries more risk. Heavy drinking carries substantially more risk. There's debate about exactly where thresholds lie, but the general pattern is clear. There's also the issue of drinking patterns. Binge drinking, consuming large amounts in a short time, might carry different risks than spreading the same total amount over more occasions. The high peak blood alcohol levels from binge drinking create more intense exposures to acetaldehyde and cause more acute oxidative stress. Genetic factors influence individual cancer risk from alcohol. Some people have genetic variants that make them more or less efficient at clearing acetaldehyde or repairing DNA damage. Those genetic differences affect how much cancer risk a given level of drinking carries for different individuals. But everyone experiences some increased risk. The time frame matters too. Cancer typically develops over many years or decades. The DNA damage and mutations accumulate gradually. This is why cancer risk is associated with lifetime cumulative alcohol consumption, not just current drinking. Someone who drank heavily for years and then stopped still carries elevated cancer risk from that past exposure, though risk does decrease over time after stopping. One challenging aspect of this is that cancer from alcohol often doesn't develop until later in life, long after the drinking occurred. A person in their 20s or 30s who drinks heavily might not see consequences for decades. The cause and effect are separated by so much time that the connection isn't always obvious. Population studies have estimated that about 4% of cancer deaths in the United States are attributable to alcohol consumption. Globally, it's similar. That means thousands of cancer deaths each year that wouldn't occur if not for alcohol. For certain cancer types, esophageal cancer, laryngeal cancer, alcohol is responsible for a much larger proportion of cases. Let's talk about something particularly important: how alcohol affects pregnancy and fetal development. When a pregnant person drinks alcohol, that alcohol crosses the placenta. The developing fetus is exposed to essentially the same blood alcohol concentration as the mother. But the fetus can't metabolize alcohol effectively. The fetal liver hasn't yet developed the enzyme systems needed to break down alcohol. So alcohol and its metabolite acetaldehyde remain in fetal tissues longer. Alcohol is a teratogen, a substance that can cause birth defects and developmental abnormalities. The developing fetus is extraordinarily vulnerable to alcohol's effects because development is such a precise, carefully orchestrated process. Cells need to divide, migrate, differentiate, and organize into tissues and organs at specific times. Alcohol interferes with these processes. The most severe outcome is fetal alcohol syndrome, or FAS. This involves a characteristic pattern of facial abnormalities, a smooth philtrum, that groove between your nose and upper lip, thin upper lip, small eye openings. But the facial features are just the visible signs. The real damage is neurological. Children with FAS have smaller brains, structural brain abnormalities, and intellectual disabilities. They often struggle with learning, memory, attention, impulse control, and social skills throughout their lives. FAS is at the severe end of a spectrum. There's a broader category called fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, or FASD, which includes children who were exposed to alcohol prenatally and have some but not all features of FAS. They might not have the characteristic facial features, but they have neurodevelopmental problems, learning disabilities, behavioral issues, difficulty with executive function and social skills. The brain is particularly vulnerable throughout pregnancy. Different brain regions develop at different times, and alcohol exposure during specific windows can affect specific functions. Early pregnancy is when the basic structure of the brain is being formed. Later pregnancy is when neurons are migrating to their proper positions, forming connections, and undergoing refinement. Alcohol can disrupt any of these processes. The mechanisms are multiple. Alcohol interferes with cell division and growth. It affects neural migration. Neurons that should travel to specific locations don't reach their destinations. It disrupts synapse formation. Neurons don't form proper connections with each other. It causes cell death. Neurons that should survive and become part of functioning circuits die instead. It affects myelination, the process of insulating neural connections to make them work efficiently. There's also oxidative stress. The fetus has limited antioxidant defenses compared to adults. When alcohol metabolism generates free radicals, fetal tissues are more vulnerable to this oxidative damage. DNA can be damaged, cell membranes can be disrupted, proteins can be altered. Alcohol affects growth overall, not just brain development. Babies exposed to alcohol in utero are often smaller. Lower birth weight, shorter length, smaller head circumference. This growth restriction reflects alcohol's effects on nutrition delivery through the placenta and on growth signaling in fetal tissues. The heart and other organs can be affected too. Congenital heart defects are more common with prenatal alcohol exposure. Kidney abnormalities, skeletal problems, vision and hearing problems, all of these occur more frequently in alcohol-exposed infants. The timing and amount of exposure matter. Heavier drinking carries more risk than lighter drinking. But there's no established safe amount of alcohol during pregnancy. Even light drinking has been associated with some developmental effects in research studies. This is why medical guidance is to avoid alcohol completely during pregnancy. Not because any amount definitely causes harm in every case, but because no amount has been proven safe, and the potential consequences are so serious. Binge drinking during pregnancy is particularly concerning. High peak blood alcohol levels create intense exposure. And drinking during specific critical periods, like the first trimester when organs are forming, can cause specific patterns of birth defects. Women often don't know they're pregnant during the first several weeks. Conception occurs, and then typically 2 weeks pass before a missed period, and then perhaps more time before pregnancy is confirmed. Alcohol exposure during this early time, before pregnancy is recognized, is a common concern. While the embryo does have some protection during the very earliest stages, before the placental circulation is fully established, alcohol exposure during early pregnancy can still cause problems, particularly because this is when the foundation of all organ systems is being laid down. The effects of prenatal alcohol exposure don't disappear after birth. Children with FASD face lifelong challenges. As infants, they might be irritable, have difficulty feeding, and show delayed development. As children, learning difficulties emerge. Attention problems, difficulty with cause and effect thinking, trouble controlling impulses. Social skills are often impaired. They might have trouble reading social cues, maintaining friendships, or regulating emotions appropriately. As adolescents and adults, people with FASD continue to struggle. Many have difficulty with independent living, maintaining employment, managing money, and avoiding problems with the legal system. Mental health issues are common: depression, anxiety, and increased vulnerability to substance abuse problems. The early brain damage from prenatal alcohol exposure creates ripples that extend throughout the lifespan. What makes this particularly tragic is that FASD is completely preventable. If no alcohol is consumed during pregnancy, these outcomes don't occur. Unlike some birth defects with genetic or unknown causes, FASD has a clear, avoidable cause. There's also emerging research on paternal alcohol consumption before conception. While the effects aren't as dramatic as maternal drinking during pregnancy, there's evidence that heavy drinking in men around the time of conception might affect sperm quality and potentially influence fetal development. This is still being studied, but it suggests that preconception health matters for both parents. Let's explore what happens when someone who has been drinking heavily for an extended period suddenly stops or dramatically reduces their alcohol intake. This is alcohol withdrawal, and understanding it shows us how profoundly alcohol changes the brain and body when used chronically. Remember how we discussed adaptation, how the brain adjusts to alcohol's constant presence? With chronic heavy drinking, your brain has essentially recalibrated to function with alcohol present. GABA systems have been downregulated because alcohol was constantly enhancing GABA. Glutamate systems have been upregulated to compensate for alcohol's suppression of excitatory transmission. Your entire nervous system has shifted its baseline to maintain function despite alcohol's depressant effects. When alcohol is suddenly removed, that adaptation becomes a problem. Your brain is now configured for functioning with alcohol, and suddenly it's not there. GABA transmission is reduced because the receptors have been downregulated. Glutamate transmission is excessive because the system has been upregulated. The result is a state of hyperexcitability. Your nervous system is essentially firing too much, with insufficient inhibition to balance the excitation. This creates withdrawal symptoms. The mild end of the spectrum includes anxiety, restlessness, tremor, sweating, rapid heartbeat, increased blood pressure, insomnia, and nausea. These symptoms typically begin within 6 to 12 hours of the last drink. They reflect that state of nervous system hyperactivity. Your hands might shake. This tremor comes from motor control centers that are now overactive without alcohol's dampening effect. You feel anxious and agitated because the brain regions that normally inhibit anxiety aren't working properly. Your autonomic nervous system, controlling heart rate, blood pressure, sweating, is hyperactive. Sleep is disrupted because your brain is too activated to sleep properly. These symptoms are uncomfortable but not dangerous for most people. They peak around 24 to 72 hours and then gradually subside over the course of a week or so as your brain begins to readapt to functioning without alcohol. But for some people who have been drinking very heavily for prolonged periods, withdrawal can be much more severe. Around 12 to 48 hours after the last drink, some people experience withdrawal seizures. Remember, your brain is in a state of excessive excitation. Neurons are firing more readily, inhibition is reduced, and this creates conditions where abnormal synchronized firing, a seizure, can occur. These are typically generalized tonic-clonic seizures, what used to be called grand mal seizures. They're potentially dangerous and are one reason medical supervision is recommended for alcohol withdrawal in heavy, long-term drinkers. The most severe form of alcohol withdrawal is called delirium tremens, or DTs. This typically begins 2 to 4 days after the last drink. It involves profound confusion, disorientation, vivid hallucinations, often visual hallucinations of things that aren't there, agitation, fever, rapid heart rate, and severe autonomic instability. Blood pressure and heart rate can fluctuate wildly. Without treatment, delirium tremens can be fatal, usually from cardiovascular collapse or complications like aspiration pneumonia. Delirium tremens reflects extreme nervous system hyperexcitability. The brain is so overactive that normal processing breaks down. Hallucinations emerge because sensory processing areas are firing excessively, creating perceptions without corresponding external stimuli. The autonomic nervous system is so dysregulated that it can't maintain stable cardiovascular function. Fortunately, with medical treatment, delirium tremens survival is high. Treatment involves benzodiazepines, medications that enhance GABA transmission, essentially substituting for alcohol's effects on GABA receptors and preventing the excessive excitation. The benzodiazepines are then gradually tapered, allowing the brain to readapt more slowly and safely. Not everyone who drinks heavily experiences severe withdrawal. The risk factors include longer duration of heavy drinking, higher quantities consumed, previous withdrawal episodes, older age, concurrent medical problems, and nutritional deficiencies. Someone who has been through withdrawal before is more likely to have severe withdrawal next time, a phenomenon called kindling, where each withdrawal episode seems to sensitize the nervous system to subsequent withdrawals. There's also something called post-acute withdrawal syndrome, or PAWS. After the acute withdrawal phase ends, some people experience lingering symptoms for weeks or months. These can include mood instability, anxiety, sleep disturbances, difficulty concentrating, and low energy. PAWS reflects the brain's gradual process of readjusting to normal function. Neurotransmitter systems, receptor densities, neural circuits, all of these are slowly returning to normal functioning, but it takes time. Physical dependence is distinct from addiction, though they often occur together. Physical dependence is when your body has adapted to a substance such that you experience withdrawal without it. Addiction involves compulsive use despite negative consequences, loss of control over use, and continued use despite wanting to stop. You can be physically dependent without being addicted. For instance, if you take certain medications for pain or anxiety as prescribed, you might develop physical dependence and experience withdrawal if you stop suddenly, but that's not addiction. And theoretically, you could have addiction without physical dependence, though with alcohol they typically go together. The brain changes underlying addiction are complex and involve reward circuits, stress systems, and executive function regions. The nucleus accumbens and its dopamine circuits become hypersensitive to alcohol-related cues and less responsive to other rewards. The amygdala and stress systems become hyperactive, creating negative emotional states that drinking temporarily relieves. The prefrontal cortex's control over impulses and decision-making becomes impaired. The result is a brain that craves alcohol, feels uncomfortable without it, and has diminished ability to resist use even when the person consciously wants to stop. Recovery involves allowing these brain changes to reverse, which happens gradually over months and years of abstinence. Neural circuits can reorganize, receptor systems can renormalize, and executive function can improve. But the vulnerability remains. The brain retains some memory of these changes, which is why relapse risk persists even after long periods of sobriety. Before we close this journey through the body, let's step back and think about alcohol in the broader human context. Alcohol isn't just a chemical that affects your body. It's woven into human culture, history, religion, economy, and social life in ways that perhaps no other substance is. Archaeological evidence suggests humans were making fermented beverages at least 10,000 years ago, around the time agriculture was developing. Some researchers even speculate that the desire to produce alcohol might have been one motivation for cultivating grains. Beer residue has been found in pottery from ancient Mesopotamia dating back 9,000 years. Wine production in what's now Georgia dates back 8,000 years. Why did our ancestors pursue fermentation? Partly, fermented beverages were safer than water in many contexts. The alcohol content and the fermentation process killed many pathogens that made water dangerous. Beer and wine could be stored when fresh water couldn't. In medieval Europe, people drank weak beer with meals because it was safer than the available water. This wasn't about getting drunk. It was about staying hydrated safely. But clearly, the psychoactive effects were recognized and valued too. Throughout history, alcohol has been used in religious ceremonies and rituals. Wine in Christianity represents the blood of Christ. Ancient Greeks had Dionysus, god of wine. Norse culture had mead in their mythology and rituals. Many cultures used alcohol as an offering to gods or ancestors. The altered consciousness alcohol provides was sometimes seen as a way to connect with the divine or spiritual realms. Alcohol has been medicine too. Before modern pharmaceuticals, alcohol was used as an antiseptic, anesthetic, and treatment for various ailments. It was often the best available option for sterilizing wounds or managing pain during procedures. Doctors prescribed alcohol for all kinds of conditions, not because it truly cured them, but because the limited medical toolkit available made it one of the few interventions that did anything at all. Economically, alcohol production and trade have been enormously important. Taxes on alcohol have funded governments. The rum trade was part of the triangular trade that included slavery. Prohibition in the United States created an entire illegal economy. Today, the global alcohol industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Wine regions, brewing traditions, and distillery heritage are sources of cultural identity and tourism. Socially, alcohol has complex roles. It's central to celebrations, weddings, holidays, victories. It's a social lubricant, making gatherings more relaxed and conversation easier. Drinking together creates social bonding. Sharing drinks signals trust and friendship. The pub, bar, or tavern has historically been a community gathering place, a site of social connection beyond just drinking. But alcohol has also been a source of tremendous harm throughout history. Alcohol abuse has destroyed families, contributed to poverty, enabled violence, and cut lives short. Different societies have grappled with this tension between alcohol's social roles and its harms in different ways. Some cultures have integrated alcohol with strong social norms about appropriate use. Others have prohibited it entirely. Most have tried various regulations, controlling who can sell it, where it can be sold, when, to whom. Indigenous populations encountering alcohol through colonization often experience devastation. Groups that hadn't historically produced or consumed alcohol lacked cultural frameworks for managing it. Alcohol became a tool of exploitation and a contributor to cultural destruction. The temperance movement of the 19th and early 20th centuries arose from genuine observation of alcohol's harms. Women particularly recognized how alcohol abuse affected families. The movement led to prohibition in the United States and similar efforts elsewhere. But prohibition demonstrated that legal bans don't eliminate drinking. They drive it underground, create black markets, and generate new problems while failing to solve the original ones. Modern approaches to alcohol tend toward regulation rather than prohibition. Minimum drinking ages, limits on where and when alcohol can be sold, drunk driving laws, taxation to discourage excessive use. These are attempts to reduce harm while acknowledging that alcohol use will continue. Cultural attitudes vary enormously. Some cultures integrate wine or beer into daily meals from young ages, with family supervision teaching moderate use. Others restrict alcohol more strictly. Some associate alcohol with masculinity. Some stigmatize alcohol use in women. Religious traditions range from sacramental use to complete prohibition. These cultural contexts shape not just how much people drink, but how they think about drinking. The science we've explored throughout this journey, how alcohol affects the liver, brain, heart, and every system, this knowledge is relatively recent. Our ancestors knew alcohol changed how they felt and behaved. They observed health consequences of heavy drinking. But they couldn't see the molecular mechanisms, the neurochemistry, the cellular damage. We're the first generations with this detailed understanding. This knowledge creates both power and responsibility. We can make informed decisions based on understanding mechanisms and risks. We can develop better treatments for alcohol use disorder, better prevention strategies, better public health policies. But knowledge alone doesn't determine behavior. The cultural meanings of alcohol, the social context of drinking, individual genetics and psychology, economic factors, mental health, stress, trauma. All of these interact with knowledge to shape how individuals and societies relate to alcohol. As you lie here, processing all this information, you might think about your own relationship with alcohol if you drink. Or you might think about loved ones who do. Or you might simply appreciate understanding these mechanisms for their own sake. The human body is extraordinary in its complexity, and alcohol's effects reveal that complexity, showing us systems we might never think about otherwise. We've traveled through your entire body together on this journey, following alcohol from the moment it touches your lips through every system it affects. We've explored your digestive system, where alcohol is absorbed, your liver, working tirelessly to process and detoxify it, your bloodstream, carrying it everywhere, your brain, with its billions of neurons and complex chemistry, altered by alcohol's presence, your heart, vessels, kidneys, immune system, hormones, sleep architecture, memory formation, balance, vision, temperature regulation, skin, developing fetuses, and more. What I hope you're taking from this journey is a sense of how interconnected everything in your body is. Alcohol doesn't affect just one thing. It touches nearly every system. A small molecule, simple in structure, creates ripples through the extraordinary complexity that is you. Your body is always working to maintain balance, to keep you functioning, to adapt to challenges. When you introduce alcohol, your body responds. It tries to process it, eliminate it, compensate for its effects, protect you from harm. Most of the time, for most people, the body manages this successfully. The liver breaks down the alcohol. The kidneys help eliminate the metabolites. The brain tolerates the temporary disruption and returns to normal. The systems recalibrate. But there are limits to this resilience. With heavy drinking over time, damage accumulates. The liver develops scarring it can't repair. The brain loses tissue it can't fully regenerate. The cardiovascular system undergoes changes that increase disease risk. The immune system's chronic suppression allows infections and cancers to take hold. The body keeps trying to maintain function, keeps compensating, but eventually reserves are exhausted. Understanding these mechanisms isn't about judging anyone's choices, it's about having knowledge. When you understand what's happening at the level of cells, organs, and systems, you're more empowered to make decisions that align with your values and goals. You understand the trade-offs. You can evaluate your own risk factors. You can recognize early warning signs of problems. If you drink, you might think about how the information we've explored relates to your own patterns and experiences. Maybe you've noticed some of these effects: the sleep disruption, the dehydration, the impaired judgment. Maybe you've been fortunate to avoid problems, or maybe you've experienced consequences that now make more sense in light of understanding the mechanisms. If you don't drink, you've gained insight into why some people do and what's happening in their bodies. You've learned about a substance that's deeply embedded in human culture and biology. You understand something fundamental about how your own systems work. Because even without alcohol, your neurotransmitters, liver enzymes, balance systems, and all the rest are functioning constantly, maintaining you. The research on alcohol continues. Scientists are still discovering new mechanisms, new effects, new potential interventions. The relationship between alcohol and health is complex, with genetics, drinking patterns, overall health, and many other factors all playing roles. The information we've explored tonight represents current scientific understanding, but that understanding keeps evolving. What doesn't change is that your body is remarkable. The fact that you have this sophisticated system for metabolizing alcohol, something that is essentially a poison, shows the power of evolution. Humans encountered fermented fruit, fermented grains, the result of natural yeasts converting sugars to alcohol, and our ancestors who could metabolize it had a survival advantage. They could consume more types of food and drink, get calories from fermented sources, and benefit from the antimicrobial properties of alcohol. So we evolved these enzyme systems, this capacity to handle moderate amounts of alcohol. But evolution couldn't prepare us for distilled spirits with high alcohol concentrations, for the easy availability of cheap alcohol, for the complex modern social contexts of drinking. Our bodies are trying to handle a substance using tools shaped for a very different environment and pattern of exposure. As you drift towards sleep now, your body is doing what it always does, maintaining you. Your heart is beating steadily. Your lungs are breathing rhythmically. Your brain is preparing to cycle through sleep stages. Your liver is processing whatever needs processing. Your immune system is patrolling. Billions of cells are performing trillions of chemical reactions, all coordinated, all purposeful, all working to keep you alive and functioning. If there's alcohol in your system right now, all these systems are accommodating that, adjusting, compensating. If not, they're working in their normal patterns. Either way, your body deserves appreciation for its constant, uncomplaining work. Thank you for taking this journey through the science of how alcohol changes the body. May this understanding serve you well. May you sleep deeply and restoratively. May you wake refreshed, with all your systems reset and ready. And may you carry this knowledge gently, using it wisely in your life however you see fit. Rest well. Your body will take care of the rest while you sleep. Good night.